Right. Good evening and welcome to the Littleton Board of Selectmen meeting for Monday, February 11th, 2019. I'm going to read through the agenda first. 6 o'clock or thereabouts, organization, Pledge of Allegiance, read mail. 6:05, department and committee updates, and we have our Cable Advisory Committee back with the update on the cable renewal process, and also an update from Master Plan Implementation Committee on the Littleton Common Revitalization Study, followed by, at 6:45 or thereabouts, public input and members' updates. 6:50, we will open the warrants and set the closing date, and if we see fit, to insert articles for the May 6, 2019 annual and special town meetings. 7 p.m., Lot 107, Invasive Species Management. Boy, does that sound intriguing. Chase is in charge of that one.
I always get the most excited.
All right. 7:15, joint meeting with the Historical Commission to discuss the Baker House, 12 Robinson Road, that the town purchased last year. 7:45, Town Buildings and Space Needs Committee. Our colleague Chuck DeCoste is not able to join us tonight, but Cindy, you're capable of carrying the ball on that? Thank you. 255 Great Road. Specific discussion. 8:15, library trustees will be in to give us a update on the library project. 8:45, the selectmen will engage in a discussion about the vacant positions of town administrator and impending vacancy for director of finance and budget, which is also the town accountant position at present. 9:05 will be the interim town administrator. Anthony will give us updates on a request to use the Littleton Common, and then also on a couple of opportunities he's located through the Community Compact Program. And we do not have minutes tonight, I believe is what you said, Anthony. Is that
That's
right?
correct.
Okay. So with that, I will ask Madam Clerk to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, Anthony, the mail?
Mr. Chairman, there is no mail that I have to share with you for this evening.
Come on, folks, you can do better than that, you know? We like letters too, you know?
Anything. Well, it's just something.
Get us a subscription to a magazine.
I'll send you Valentine.
There you
All right,
go.
there you go. That's right, thank you.
Put that in for the 25th.
Helps get us back on schedule, though. 6:05, there, Cable Advisory Committee, and is there any prefatory needed here? I know we have a proposed motion, but anything, Anthony, you want to say in terms of introduction?
No, Alan McRae and Mark Crory are here to talk about, they were here a
December?
month and a half ago, or 2 months ago? Yeah, and to talk about the renewal process for both Comcast and Verizon.
Yep.
So we received that letter, we gave it to our CAC, the Cable Advisory Committee, and Alan and Mark are going to give us an update on what the process will be going forward to negotiate with both Verizon and Comcast.
At that time, there was a lot of pending federal potential activity, and I don't know if there's anything new on that front, but if there is, let us know.
It's all tied up in court already, so.
Ah, all right.
Yeah, and with that, Nick Lawler was in Norwood this week, meeting with a consultant, talk about that small cell technology that was a concern. So we are being proactive and staying on top of that. Nick Stewart does a great job and keeps me updated, so.
Okay, great. And with that, I guess the floor is yours, Mark, Alan, whoever wants to take the lead on it.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for inviting us again. It's always a pleasure.
Pleasure to see you.
As was in your packet, we're looking at renewal franchise agreements with both our cable providers, both Comcast and Verizon. The agreements are set to expire in 2021. Now, I know that's a long time from now, but there are some procedural matters that the law says we have to do 30 to 36 months out. So we've received a letter from Comcast indicating that they are interested in renewing, and I have provided you in your packet tonight our reply telling them the same thing, that we want to renew. We'll be doing informal negotiations, but we're reserving our right to the rules under the formal, and they've done the same thing. We've also are asking the board tonight to allow us to use the firm of Epstein and August from Cambridge in our negotiation process. We've used them several times before, and that's their forte. The other reason we're here tonight is just to go through the negotiation process, just so you are familiar with it. I know you and Selectman Knox may very well have been in one of your iterations through this sort of thing, but the others have not. And on the board in front of you, it talks about the renewal letter. We have received that. Once we receive that and we reply back, we go into what's called the ascertainment phase. And that's a period in which the town determines its cable-related needs and its interest. Now, we may hold public hearings. We may do a survey, which we've done in the past, to get public input. We also meet with various stakeholders like seniors and the park and rec people, smaller groups, and we may even hold a public hearing. So there's no required time frame for the ascertainment. And generally, in the past, that's gone on for about almost 2 years. It just takes whatever time it takes. The recommendation from the state is that it be completed within 6 to 12 months before the expiration, so that there's plenty of time for give and take back and forth. The next thing, once we do our ascertainment, is the request for proposals. Now, we're looking probably in the fall of 2020 to provide a request for proposals to Comcast, and early in 2021 for Verizon. We'll send out an RFP, and what we usually do is we send the RFP, we also send a proposed contract. We rewrite it up the way we want it and send it to them so that they reply back to us based on what we've asked for. And the things that we ask for in there are those that the people have said, we're interested in having this, or check into this or look into that. So we send them a draft agreement with a 30 or 60-day window for them to reply back. When they do reply back, then we get into timeframes that have to be met. We will then hold a public hearing so that people may attend and hear what their proposal is to us and how we feel about doing that. So we have a 4-month window then that we have to hold a public hearing, do the final negotiations, and decide yay or nay whether we're going to renew or we're going to deny. We have never been down the road of any denial, but in the event that something like that should happen, then we have an administrative proceeding where Comcast comes in, we hold a public hearing, we have to explain to them why we're denying, and they get to make their replies. If it's something that can be cured, then we give them the time to cure it. If it's something that we just don't think they can do anything about, then we give a final denial, but that goes to a judgment review by the state. And to this date, I'm not aware that any denial has ever been upheld. It's always, no, go back to the drawing board. So chances of us doing that are practically nil. We're dealing with two entities that know what they're doing and have been doing a fairly decent job, so I don't see that that'll be a problem. So that's generally how it goes. We probably won't meet again to talk about this probably for a year and a half. We expect to get a letter from Verizon asking to negotiate sometime in the next 2 months. While both the contracts are up in the same year, one is August and one is December. So we've got the Comcast, it'll come from Verizon, whereupon we'll send you another letter similar to the one in your packet tonight replying to Verizon that, yes, we want to negotiate. So, that's pretty much how it goes. We await your questions.
Okay, I've got a few, but I'll see if board members Sue first.
I don't have any.
Joe?
A little bit off subject. Are there towns that only have one server or whatever you want to call it? We're lucky to have Verizon and Comcast. But I hear other towns, well, we only have Charter and there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah, a lot of them do, but most of the cities and towns have more than one provider. Some have up to 3 and 4.
Okay.
I think when Verizon got into the game, they only got into like 37 communities initially. They might have doubled it
Yeah.
after, but then they stopped.
Yeah, but oddly enough, Boston, the largest, doesn't have Verizon. And they're trying to get them, so I don't know what the holdup. I think it's probably because it's very hard for them to get in
Hook up a lot of.
and hook
those
everything
buildings,
up.
Yeah. Okay. As a practical matter, do you expect to do any back and forth with either of those entities before you bring on Attorney Epstein, or
Oh, yes,
you do?
yeah. What we'll do initially is, we'll just have him make sure that have dotted all the i's on the 36-month thing, and then we'll talk back and forth with them, and we'll bring him on the last year.
Okay, so you
For-
essentially
for
do your own
side, yeah.
negotiating, more, or
Yeah.
he checks your work? and-
All the ascertainment business we'll do ourselves, so. It's not our first rodeo, we've done this several times.
I know you just told us how far out we are in the process. Are you at all familiar with other communities near us that might be closer to their negotiating date, and have you any anecdotal tales of anything
I-
funky going on out there?
No, I've looked at the website where the state puts up all the renewals that have been happening. And the latest ones, there's nothing unusual happening. It's pretty much standard.
Yeah.
That may change between now and 3 years from now, but so far, nothing out of the ordinary.
Okay, great.
I suspect that the things we were worried about the first time we met here a month or so back will be long time before anything happens with that. It's tied up in courts right now, and it'll continue to be tied up for a long time, so.
Okay, and we trust that if there is a significant update, you'll be back to see us?
Oh, absolutely.
All right. Well, in the interim, unless there's more discussion, we do have a proposed motion before us.
You just need to sign a letter, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, but this is, the motion there is relative to giving approval for the use of Attorney Epstein's services.
Okay, you ready?
Yep.
Mr. Chair, move that the Board of Selectmen vote for the Littleton CAC Cable Advisory Committee to notify Comcast of the town's intention to negotiate a renewal franchise agreement in accordance with the provisions of the Cable Communications Policy Act of 1984. And furthermore, to approve the use of Attorney Peter Epstein of the firm Epstein and August to guide CAC through the negotiation process.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made by Selectman Napoli, seconded by Selectman Gerbig. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you, folks.
Thank you very
Mark, you
much.
didn't have anything to say tonight?
I'm just here for eye candy.
Boost the rating. Yes.
In case my hearing aid went out.
That's right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, next up is long-anticipated update from Mike Zeldin, Chairman of the Master Plan Implementation Committee. Apologies, you have been trying to get on our agenda for about a month, but we've had a busy month, you might have heard.
Yes, and you still have many busy months, so I'll try to be as brief as possible and informative.
Appreciate that. I mean, again, in terms of, anything in terms of introduction or preparatory that we need to discuss, you got a presentation, right?
Yeah, this is just to,
20 slides, but he told me he's going to talk quick.
this is just to alarm him and Cindy. Those are the two that are the targets of the long, okay.
Okay, well,
Okay,
we're
quick.
all- we're all very interested,
Good
but,
company.
but with quick studies, okay?
Okay, I know you are. Okay,
Yes.
just to review so that we're all caught up, because in many ways, the implementation committee is a very different kind of committee, at least as it's been tasked by both the planning board and the board of selectmen. We actually work only through already existing committees, including yourselves and the planning board. And just to make clear, up to this date, it's been primarily, if not exclusively, the planning board and the Board of Selectmen that basically do the implementation. We try our best to provide guidance and promotion, period. Next slide. I'm just trying to remind, all right? We started out, we started with a blank slate, and we came up, at the moment, the seven-member group came up with originally 7 initial targets. There were a variety of reasons for it, which I've already, I think, given you the justification and background for it. I'm happy to say that we've got an 8th one in, because the 7th one basically was done. The Historic Commission completed its survey and analysis of our resources available, especially in the Common. And the area plan for parcels in the vicinity of Taylor and Foster, which was on one of the hot things on the master plan, has already started. And there's no reason for me to comment. You've already had an update, which brings me to the next summary, is you and the planning board both had excellent in-depth updates. To give you an example of how it really works, by relevant committees, groups, engineers, that MPIC basically just watches and makes sure it stays in reasonable contact with the master plan itself. Okay, so let me cut to the chase. Yep, you go. Right. The Common is on the list, and it turns out to be the Common is a little bit, not, I wouldn't say difficult, but it has its own unique challenges. The planning board has, at the beginning of this process, the planning board had a pretty full deck of things to do. In order to get the process going on initiating action in the Common, the MPIC took upon itself, with the cooperation of the planning board, the preparation of a competitive application of grant from the Commonwealth, and also had some funds from the master plan development itself, which were put in, and plus additional funds which we subsequently asked the town, and the town generously provided. And we put that together basically to initiate the process, because not all committees are created equal. Some have a lot more work than others. That means the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board. So MPIC went to work and basically began looking at the Common. And to cut to the chase, we hired a consultant. There we have a 7-person committee, all of whom are familiar with the town, but we're not experts in planning.
Including a member of the planning board and Chase from our.
I want to just point out that as originally formed, this is an important point, that there is always a member of, at least one member of a planning board, one member from the Board of Selectmen on, so they're constantly being streamed. They're constantly aware of what's going on and more important to us, providing input from a totally different perspective, hopefully, because we have to come back and give you, basically provide you with guidance. Sometimes you don't like the guidance, sometimes you will like the guidance. And it's, since you set policy, you will decide how you want to, you do so at your own peril. Okay, so when we looked at the Common, just quickly go through a summary, because we have some real important advances made. First of all, nearly all the parcels in the Common area, and what I mean by that is King Street and Great Road, and not all of King Street and not all of Great Road, are privately owned, and there are numerous and different owners. So when you look at this, unlike other towns that have a common area where the town may own great swaths of land, that's not the case for Littleton. It's an individual battle, as it were, or shall we say, encounter at each turn. All right? The second is that the town has been aware of the possibilities of what could be in the Common, what was desired in the Common for many years. There is an existing underlying zoning regulations that allow for something called mixed use. That's commercial and residential. It's there.
On the same property, right.
Covers everything in there, okay? So, and I'll just say presumably, and it's noted in the roadmap material they got, if an owner wished to, as it were, start building things on it to use their property in a certain way, as long as they're conforming with our rules, they could do it. What keeps them from doing it is rules involving setbacks and all the intricacies, I'll say, of zoning, plus the health issues, because in order to operate in the Common at the moment, you need, as everyone knows here, a septic, and there's a limit to what you can do when you have a septic. Okay, so background. The town for years had said, let's look at the feasibility. I don't mean to cover the ground that the sewer task force covers. I'll just summarize and say that the sewer is an important component of revitalizing any area in the town. The common is no exception. So that process is already underway. That also is an aspect in the master plan, and it extends to the common as well. So another instance in which MPIC is working through another committee. Basically, you're doing it, okay. So and I want to emphasize again, the many parcels are small. And so it is suspected, and we've been told this by the consultants, that as a result of this, that the owners, I don't know if you noticed, but the common area has been more abundant in terms of investment for many years. In fact, other than the car dealership, it's been quiet, deadly quiet. This isn't nothing wrong with it, just that's the way it is. And part of the reason is that there's no possibility for a variety. There's no possibility, even if an owner wanted to do very much. So there are certain owners in there who like, shall we say, the financial world in which they're living in there. That's their prerogative, that's fine, all right? To summarize, we had 2 open town events where we asked residents by giving them specific, what we'll call model possibilities, not plans. There's nothing for the town to build here. We don't own the land. We can't control, other than the green swath in the middle and the Baker House, that's it. So the residents, when they come in to seek revitalization of the common, they want a real place. They just don't want, well, they've told us very clearly they want space. There are a whole bunch of items that are desired. I'll show you in a pie chart in a moment. What came out of the 2 town, shall we say, wide meetings? Can I have the slides all? Okay, so let me just bring you a summary of what I'm going to say tonight. There's the town vision and preferences. That means the residents and everyone else, all the stakeholders in town. Other than, and on the right, are the property owners' visions and preferences. Sometimes they're opaque, sometimes they're not. The rules of the terrain, which is just a fancy word for shaping what happens to the common, is implemented or can be achieved by us only through zoning. We can't go into an owner unless we take the property and say, you will build apartments, you will build a store. Zoning is the only technique we've got, other than persuasion, to get something going in the common by anyone. So we use zoning as the shaping tool. The minute we say zoning, that means planning board. So the planning board actually is going to be carrying out one of the most basic operations, and I say will be carrying out because with the availability of the roadmap, we've provided a informational foundation for the regulation process, the re-examination of the regulation process to go forward. 2 questions were asked. Basically 2 questions. Are the existing zoning rules we've got strong enough, robust enough for us to do anything in the common without a sewer? Number 2, what improvements have to be made? What can we do to improve the situation? The consultant was really there to help us out. Their expertise is in that kind of operation. They actually participate actively and contribute in other towns to actually writing regulations. The next slide, maybe I can, all right. Let's be clear. The cost, in order to stay within our budget, we did not undertake a study of the entire common. So we didn't go up and down King Street. We did not go up and down the whole length of Great Road. Not practical, and also not necessary, because a lot of both of those streets are at the moment what they call stable. That means there's ownership or businesses that have been there for years. They have infrastructure, gasoline stations, residents, very difficult, expensive to uproot themselves. So it's not that they're never going to move. It's not that they're never going to change. It's just it's to understand what the impact would be if they do move is not a good use of resources. Better go where we can have some reason, including cooperation of the property owner, to say, okay, here's a place that's more likely than any other. They're called soft spots. They're described. And here is an overlay, and you'll see basically it's Northern Bank's property on one, to be blunt, on one side of Great Road, and a few properties across the street from it. That is used as the vehicle to explore with the town residents and with anyone else who's interested, including owners who did attend our meetings, what's your preference, what's your vision? Let's have the next one. All right. I'm not going to go through all the scenarios that they're there with you. These are basically, these models you see here are basically space takers. They're not what the buildings could look like. They're not even what the buildings, I think, look like. At least I hope not. The only thing that you see in here are the first beginnings of an attempt to show that by revitalizing the common just by changing parking, you really change the common a little bit. But there's not too much you can do here. Next one. The next scenario has, scenario two is okay. It's all right. It's all right. Scenario 2 is the same thing, only with the sewer. But we haven't changed anything with zoning. Really haven't changed anything. We've just moved things around, maybe a few minor changes, and that's it. Again, very little change made.
So, like, the footprint doesn't change, but uses inside could change.
They could conceivably change, right? Next. And then we present this. Now, I want to assure everyone here, and I know people who've attended the meeting and have done calls and followed up, we all understand that this does not represent the actual appearance of any particular common. It's a space filler, so that people get an idea of how you could use space if you started doing things. These are the range. And we were asking the residents, how far, how little, where do you want to go? Because we're going to do regulation, we have to know what makes sense for them. We can't make plans. We can't make regulations, in other words, unless we know ahead of time a little bit about what residents have in mind. We have the next one. As much as people really, I forget what the pie chart, I think the pie chart of the operation showed that about half of the population that attended the meetings really liked scenario 3, with the understanding that there would be other things in it. There were, I would say, over 15 different items that also overlapped with, we like scenario 3 with the sewer. I mean, it's just simple. Scenario
Some
4.
of those details in the, I don't recall, in the report itself?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
And then scenario 4, just to give you some comfort, there are a lot of words used to describe this particular scenario. I don't think I can use them here in mixed company, but basically, this is not something that the town residents who attended had much interest in. Okay, that makes the job, now we have some definition, but there was something more. The next one. This is it. This really changed the game. Perhaps from the planning board, this was, shall we say, more work, okay? What the priority here is, about half, 52% of the attendees like the idea of mixed use again. But as you can see, there were a bunch of other things. They wanted more businesses. We don't know what more means. They want senior housing, streetscapes. There's a list of items that were there. In other words, to translate this in operational terms, the folks wanted something that was a place, a neighborhood. This is important to keep in mind. This is what we were told by, it's both aesthetics, how it feels, and to make it very clear from an economic point of view in terms of, well, how much wealthier does the town get? You'll see from the roadmap, from our economic analysis, is that using current rates, and I'll be very happy to go into that in case it's mystifying because it doesn't look very impressive, because properties, for example, that are owned by Hudson, on which it's IBM, which is one of the biggest properties in terms of assessment, the economic recovery is very small. But two take-home messages. In order for this mixed vision to be realized, it's businesses and people, and it's housing and people. Businesses and enterprise have to be together in the common. That's the take-home message here. Plus, it's got to look right. Now, I will end on this point, that at the moment, a fair amount of information. I'm sorry?
You've got more slides.
No. That's enough already. I mean, if you got questions, I'll be happy to use the slides to help you. But we're at the point now where the commentary that you see in the roadmap is one piece, in addition to everything else, that the planning board now will use to undertake zoning analysis and begin writing regulation. And in that connection, we've recommended a particular vendor, Util, who's very experienced in doing this kind of work. We're following the suggestion that made by both Fort Point and Util to use, in part or in whole, depending on what the planning board decides to use, something called form-based coding as the mechanism to capture the zoning regulations that capture in turn.
You know, that's a new enough concept that while we've heard it before, it probably wouldn't hurt if you gave a brief description of what form-based code.
Yeah, yes, I'll do it by contrast. At the moment, we are using something called Euclidean methods for writing. Now, at first I thought, oh, excitement. This is going back to Greek stuff. It isn't. It's Euclid, Ohio. Let's be clear. Okay? Really? It's Euclid, Ohio was a town that invented for the United States. Amazing. The laying out of how you would use property. That is, no hard iron forges in the same place that you have housing. No garages, no horses. I mean, it's an interesting story.
Well, use.
It's use. Form-based says, whatever's going on behind your facade, of course, that's not altogether true. We don't allow automotive, for example, in the common anymore. Horses, I'm not so sure of. But I do know that form-based code will give us an opportunity to give something to the public that the public has expressed desire in, is a certain look. How uniform it's going to be, what the colors are going to be, what the facades are going to be, planning board and the people, not MPIC. Because we've got, well, 60 more items to go, and I'm not about ready to undertake a job that we're not charged to do. I'd much rather have us, if you pardon the expression, keep us all honest, work with committees, berate you and applaud you accordingly. So it's the planning board and you at the moment that are still on board and to, quote, do the heavy lifting. We're here to help. We are very good, we think, at grant writing. We're very good at persuasion. We're very good at beating, we've met with owners in the common. We have an idea of where they're coming from, not all of them, but we have an idea. We're sensitive to where they're coming from. So we're here to help, and on the other items. And now I'm on a slight downer. I'll just say that I do know that you folks are considering, I'll give you an example of a part of our job. I do know that there is a great interest in having, I'll start with a neutral word, a community center in the common, all right? According to what the folks who participated in, I don't mean the committee members, but the people in town, who told us what they want in the common, the formulation was, it's number 35 on the list, okay, if you want to see it. It's the feasibility of an intergenerational community center. It isn't seniors, it's not youngsters, it's not middle-agers, it's intergenerational. So I'm just saying that tomorrow night at the next MPIC meeting, we'll be discussing, shall we say, what kind of guidance, including none at all, that we might want to provide you. I don't know how far you folks can get with the process, but we're here to help and even to suggest that you take a look at consequences, as we have done, of what happens to the common if you do this. What happens if you put something in the common like this that is X? In general, I'll just simply say, a community center in the common is a great idea, but we have to do it right. And I have no idea at the moment and wouldn't even try to personally tell you what it is that's right. And with that, I'm done.
Okay. Fair to say there's been we've been individually, as a group, receiving a lot of input on the various topics that you touched on and on the report itself since it's been in circulation since December. Things ranging from feedback at the budget hearing about, well, we've, got all this going on for this consultant, that consultant, when does it start to yield? Is it just consultants breeding consultant? I'm not saying, I'm not being judgmental, I'm just passing along feedback. And then also, while the direct mission of MPEC was to make sure the master plan is implemented rather than sits on a shelf, there's been some concern about, whoa, do we have to do all this all at once? Which is, interesting. I'm just sharing what I've, heard from different places. And then with specific reference to, you chose to refer to it as the intergenerational center. I don't doubt, because I participated in those forums, what the feedback is from that group is But believe it or not, we hear from other folks too, and hear very different and specific messages on that, so we have to balance all that. So with that, I want to invite other board members to jump in, and time allowing, I'd like to get public involved too.
Sure. Just one quick comment about, in general, about doing too much at once or, no. The reason that you see on the roadmap all those things lined up almost simultaneously is because the lead times to get things done is quite long. In other words, if once an infrastructure change goes in, an improvement goes in, we've looked at MassDOT, we've looked at, we don't own the roads. Let me be simple. We don't own King Road, King Street, we don't own Great Road. We can't control it. We have to go to the state. And just to get a crosswalk, just to put up a sign, just to do anything there. So we got to start a conversation with them today so that 8 years from now, we may see something. Okay? So we're taking that into account. Now, are we going to have a pause in starting up? Yes, because there are certain things that have to be done first before the other things can start, shall we say, other items in the list. But there are enough here, I would say, to keep subsequent generations of implementation committees and Board of Selectmen and planning boards and economic development committees busy for at least 10 years. Thank you very much for your attention.
Don't run off
I'm
just
not.
yet, no, okay, good, all right.
So,
Cindy?
yeah, so thank you, Mike, thanks for the presentation and the work that you've put into it. My question is, when we talk about the town, this is what the town wants, this is what the community wants, as far as the vision that's been set forth in the roadmap. In the roadmap itself, it says that really the workshops were only attended by a little over 50 residents.
No, actually, the
Stakeholders.
total we got was 200. We had two of them.
Okay, so I
Go
must have
ahead,
read
sorry.
that wrong.
No, it's,
Okay,
it's-
all right,
Yeah.
because that's what I thought I read. All right, so even at the number of 200 for 2 workshops, is that really what you would consider robust community engagement? As opposed to having, I thought at one point this was supposed to be presented at town meeting in the fall of 2018.
The only thing that we ever envisioned presenting to the town meeting would not come from us. It would come as zoning changes through the planning board.
Okay.
There was never any
So
intention.
so it was just through the zoning was supposed to be presented, not the
Yeah, because-
revitalization
Yeah,
roadmap?
we're dealing, I don't know how to put it, but the best way to put it is that the town doesn't control its destiny here. If you want to put a building into wherever you want, the town votes, 2 million, 5 million, whatever, to do something, and you buy the land, you put the building, you have incredible control over what you do.
Right.
This is not the case for the common. We have to find, as I tried to depict in that slide, we have to set up certain
Well,
rules.
we're opening up avenues for development on the common. We're giving the property owners more use of their property, that we're giving them more alternatives.
Yes, but there are rules for that. There are constraints. I can't speak for the planning board, but
Right.
that when the planning board says that we are going to have a particular look to a building, and yes, we're going to put the parking on the rear of any building, any new buildings. Let's be clear, this is not tear down what you got and you got to put this up. This would be more than likely, I mean, we have people who are expertise, I might suspect this would be an overlay, but it would basically only redevelopment or new development would be full under the rules. Now, I'm not an expert in zoning, but that's my guess. So it only affect, not only affect, it would affect any new development. If a building goes down or someone starts significantly changing the facade of their building, and again, the
So
planning
if
board
they
will say-
take down their building and decide to demo it and then rebuild, that's what you're talking about?
That's correct. That's
Okay.
or there's some empty spaces on them.
Right, no, I know that. So not to take too much time. So my other question is the comment about businesses and enterprises, they need to be together. I don't know if I wrote that right. Businesses and
People.
people need to be
Residents,
together.
yes.
So is that to say that the residents, I mean, there's a lot of residences around the common. There's Robinson Road, there's Adams Street, there's Goldsmith Street, there's Jennifer Street. Are they not enough to sustain businesses
Not
on the
quite.
common?
Not quite.
So we need to build more housing to sustain the businesses on the common?
When you say "we," I don't think you meant that. Maybe you did.
No,
You meant
Mike,
builders.
listen to me.
Yeah.
No, I didn't mean we.
Yeah.
I meant that we need to have the business owners, give them the opportunity to create housing along with their businesses on their property.
The minute, when you change.
We're giving
yeah,
them the zoning the opportunity to do that.
Yes, but again, it's two-sided. Yes, here's the opportunity, here's what you can do, but you can't, here are the limits where you can go. That's implicit in regulation.
Okay.
I
just,
think-
And by the way, just for the record, we've already been privately approached by at least two different out-of-town developers who wanted to know when can they start, because they're looking to buy,
right.
but
And honestly, that doesn't,
mean much.
it doesn't make me warm and fuzzy. I have to be honest with you.
No, I know. I
It
mean,
makes
not
me
everybody likes it.
apprehensive.
Yeah. I'm with you, yeah.
I get it to some respect. I don't really agree with some of it. I'm going to put faith in the process. I'm going to put faith in the planning board that this is going to generate what we hope it will generate. I just am concerned about the amount of growth in Littleton, as are a majority of the residents in town, especially with the housing component to this. I mean, every time I turn around, the last thing that we want in Littleton is more houses. So I have a lot of apprehension with that piece of the roadmap.
Okay.
I think one of the things that the Master Plan Implementation Committee saw is that there's a distinction between more houses on a virgin piece of land and more houses within a neighborhood that could be the common. And I think one of the things that's working in the back of our minds is that, Anthony, if you want to flip to the image of scenario 3 real quick, is that these things don't happen overnight. And so,
The one with all the labels on is probably useful. I mean, which, yeah, that's fine, whatever.
sure, there you go.
Yeah.
The idea there is that the residential component and the business component it's not we snap a finger, it's that we're putting the structure in place to allow these things to come forward. And through hopefully good zoning, we get it 100% right out of the gate. But if it's not exactly what we want, it's not like all of this gets built out with something that we don't think is perfect. It's, okay, the first project came through and it's pretty close to what we want, but there are a couple things that we want to tweak. And this is something that could be built out over 20, 25 years kind of thing, not a, overnight.
Right.
And all
And I
at
didn't
once.
expect it to happen overnight. I just think having this happen on top of everything else that we have happening around us is a concern, or could be a concern for Littleton. In some respects. So it really depends on how that pans out. It really
Yeah.
comes from that.
Yeah, the other thing I want to keep in mind, there's another piece in I mean, we have to be, our committee can't allow things to get siloed. In other words, when you talk about housing doesn't exist without, and I don't mean to drag everything into it, but water supply, sewering, transportation. There's a long list of other things that go along with it, and when you don't do it, there are other things that go along with not doing it.
Right.
And the thing is that one thing we can do in the common, and I don't know if property owners are going to do it, is diversify our housing stock. We don't have to go very far. If you look at some of the tables, the amount of population growth and housing that you get in here, these are small parcels. I mean, I think the total number of residences is somewhere in the vicinity of 83 total, which is packed in. I don't think we're going to get that far. Let's say half, 40. And the number of occupants is 1.67 occupants per unit. So you're talking about 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. Not, spreads for 3, 4 people. I mean, not that I have anything against it, it's just that that's what this can accommodate.
Right. If they're affordable, and that's a whole nother can of worms.
Well, and by the way,
know.
this is one of the reasons
Yeah,
why we're very
so,
interested in the whole issue of
right.
land use.
Right.
Anyway,
So I won't take up any more time. I just, one more question.
Go ahead.
Can you define responsible entity and potential partners in the action matrix? What does that mean?
That means we're guessing at who the planning board and the board of selectmen, who ultimately control purse strings, should have responsibility for pursuing.
Okay,
And these are not assignments that MPIC once, these are not assignment MPIC. MPIC is mentioned all over the place. I think we're mentioned mainly as gadflies, not as executioners, I hate to use the term, but we won't execute.
Okay.
That's not who we are. We can't get into that.
Okay.
We lose our mantle of impartiality and being nags.
Okay, all right, that's it, thanks.
I'll just throw it in, I'll try to be brief on this, personal perspective on the mixed use. I think the whole key is, the details, how it's done, how it manifests itself in planning board regulations, changes in zoning. The concept of mixed use in the common, not only is it preserved as underlying zoning right, but it's not too distant memory when the common was less busy, it actually had more, 50 years ago, 60s, and I can, remember, there were more properties where there were, businesses and residences sharing the same building, or places that are now businesses that were residences. So, a residential component to the common is just kind of reclaiming part of our past, if it's done right. If it results in, monstrous buildings that we don't associate with Littleton at any point in its history, well, that's done wrong. So let's do it right instead of doing it wrong.
And you're right, zoning is, you can say 3 levels, that's it, or 2 levels, that's it. I mean, you can regulate what you can regulate.
Mike, I appreciate your packing. I'm trying to get out of here, but I do want to put you on the spot with respect to the budget items.
Yes.
That we've talked about in terms of planning for next year and budgeting. Could you touch on those real quick and give us in, a minute or so, the sort of the scope associated with those budget items?
All right, the only budget item that we are considering, I think it was for $65,000, I think it's on the list of things, and that comes from a discussion that started some time ago, an analysis that started some time ago, based on our experience with this, about looking at land use as a total, shall we say, not looking at it, but understanding how to implement land use. There's I believe, Cindy, you sent me a copy of something, I forget the time, it was updated. It was basically looking at the corridor of Great Road. The
The
Great
open
Road
space
corridor.
and recreation plan?
Yes,
Yeah.
the corridor of Great Road. And that's been very much in the front for us. And in there, there's a lot of aspirational statements about how to implement a certain kind of preservation of open space. But not missing, but it's very hard to do. It's the same thing. The corridor is private property. What kind of resources are needed? I put the estimate there because in talking to consultants who do what we'll call wide area planning, or wide urban planning or suburban planning, to write an estimate, what would it take to basically start connecting conceptually and regulatory-wise, and then try to get a handle for the first time, what do we need to put in place to bring money into the town, for the town to implement open space and housing, including affordable, in order to make a coherent address to an issue or a set of issues. That's all. If we don't reach our deadline of being satisfied that we know how to go, what to go, we're not going to ask for anything. And by the way, we won't be doing the work. We'll maybe write the proposals to get the money.
So
but we
which area would that cover? Is that on Great Road?
We'll probably start there, but there are a lot of questions that, for example, you asked about the common itself. There's also Foster. I mean, these
No,
are.
but just quickly, getting back to this, Mike, the land that, the
Yeah.
65,000 that you're seeking for
No,
the
we're not
land
seeking,
use.
we put that in because as basically a way to signal that we believe in order to do a reasonably good job in putting together an overall town approach to implement preservation of open space side by side with housing. In other words, to address the problem of land use, to get someone who really knows what they're doing. This is sort of like the minimum cost of entry to do that kind of implementation direction that would go to both boards, not to MPIC.
Well, the Metropolitan Area Planning Council already did a study of Great Road.
I know, that's what I'm using as my
So is it
launch
something
pad.
different than what's in that
Yes.
report?
Yes, because that cuts Great Road there are many other areas in town with open space. Almost, I think it's still 68% of our town is open space with spots around, plus open, a lot of it's private. How do we preserve it? Is that what we're gonna do? Or what?
Important crossroads for a lot of different topics that the public's interested in. I'll just start by reminding folks that are here in the audience, if they're interested, the full report, the revitalization roadmap, Littleton Common, is available on our website. Whereabouts, Anthony? Any
Would be
idea?
under the master plan implementation.
It's also at the planning board side.
Planning board
Yeah.
section?
Because we're a child of both you and the planning board.
Right.
Please keep that in mind.
It's
Okay.
also in the packet.
And since we're segueing into public input, I'll just merge the two and ask if anybody has any questions on this topic. And I don't want to let you away without the opportunity of getting beat up somehow, Mike, so.
Fine, I'm wearing a tie, I can get beat up.
Yeah, so if anyone has any questions on that topic, invite them now. Otherwise, we do have a couple planning board members here with us tonight as well. Well, you can always grab them in the audience too. So, terrific. Ed, yes.
Ed Mullen, Vice Chair Planning Board, 10 Grist Mill Road. Form-based code, in my opinion, definitely addresses some of the issues that are in the common. That being said, at our last meeting, we also spoke with Corey Godfrey, and we are rezoning for the.
Corey Godfrey is the water quality engineer at the water department.
Correct, thank you. We're increasing the size of the aquifer district that actually encompasses more of the common. So it makes smart sewer that much more important for all this time together. There's just so many other moving parts that addressing this revitalization portion of zoning should occur while everything else is occurring. It doesn't mean it's gonna get built in the next 25 years, but it's a roadmap to build it and how to build it, and it can be improved as it goes along. Form-based code is look, touch, feel. It's not about setbacks, it's not about distances. You can require or acquire what you want by each individual proposal, and then make them all work together. So, once the first one goes in, if it's what you like, they modify and duplicate down the road. Height limits, I think, will be important to make sure we remain the town of Littleton and not the city of Lowell. So, the height requirements are definitely something we put into place. Mixed use, I think, is a great idea as well, because it does, like you say, reclaim some of what was once our downtown, and you do it in smaller units where you can make it affordable, and you can also make it a commuter-friendly location. My 2 cents.
Okay. Certainly an important ongoing topic going forward. Mr. Finley?
Rick Finley, Beaverbrook Road, I'm speaking for the Shade Tree Committee. I see a lot of green in the drawings and things, but I don't know whether we've actually formalized, and this goes to the planning board also, that as we move forward with little projects, we're doing our best to keep the common area shaded and as many trees as possible going in. We've got some issues with emerald ash borers, so we've got to address up in the park area. Anyway, I just push that for,
Key part of what we want it to look like, shade trees.
Yep.
Yeah.
it's part of the neighborhood.
It's in the list. All I can do is encourage everyone here, and please spread the word, that ask your friends, neighbors, that when the planning board, I don't mean to pick on the planning board, or the board of selectmen has their meetings and hearings, that please show up and make your input known. And by the way, don't hesitate to let MPIC know, because we can also annoy them immensely, to a lesser extent, than the multiple voices of many citizens. So I think this is worth paying attention to, because more than likely, we're going to get one, shall we say, whack at this, really.
If I may just add on to that
Sure.
again.
Yeah.
Moving forward, talking about open space, one of the things that we can also look in that form-based code is attaching some of the units, and as units are multiplied or created in the downtown area, a fee could be paid into an open space fund, or in order for them to actually build the unit, they would need to have to actually purchase open space in another part of town. So you can tie the two together, so you can have the open space where you want it. Or you could say, you're getting this many units, we want a park
You know,
also.
some towns, for those opportunities, you pay into a fund which the town could choose to use for infrastructure improvements, sidewalking, street lighting,
There could
all
be a
that sort of
sidewalk
stuff.
fund, there's so many
Flowering,
towns, yeah, there's
a
so
lot of
many
things.
ways that we could tie it in to then benefit to get that open space. We could tie it to historic. We could tie it to so many other things that the town does want and want to protect. And yet get the density where it belongs.
And that right there is the basis for the request for money to support the consulting services and why it's sort of put under the umbrella of land use, because housing, open space, historic, recreation, it all fits under this umbrella of land use and balancing those multiple land uses. And so that land use isn't intended to mean just conserve open space, but rather utilize our space most effectively.
Great. Well, if the board doesn't object, we'll thank Mike for his time.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Mike.
Appreciate it.
All right. And again, the call will go out if there's any public input, and again, this would be on any topic that we haven't already scheduled on the agenda. So if you're here for one of the other agenda topics, you'll get your chance under that item, but otherwise, any general comments? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Megan Rank, 6 Greenville Road,
Yep.
Littleton. I'm here tonight, just like I was here for a second SRO, because of safety concerns. Recently, friends and I have become aware that surrounding towns have banned retail marijuana establishments, even towns that supported legalizing in 2016. As a citizen of Littleton, this makes me nervous. We are set to open 2 establishments, and with our proximity to interstates, I fear that our town could be overwhelmed with traffic and related issues. I am here tonight to ask you about changes. We can limit the number of establishments to 1. I have a handout from Mass Cannabis Control, if you want to see, talking about the different options we have as a town. My immediate concern tonight is that members of our town boards, and importantly our citizens, didn't fully understand what we could and could not do as a town. There has been confusion in online discussions, and that concerns me. We voted on an important warrant article without fully knowing all of our options. This is an enormous topic. How we unroll it will have immediate implications on our traffic, longer-term implications on the conditions of heavily used roads, quality of our life, and potentially our property values. I'm asking you to please press pause. I ask you as a board to fully study this law and let us know in a public manner what all of our options actually are. We all need to understand and be on the same page. Might our chief of police be able to discuss with chief of police in towns already running establishments and report his findings? I'm concerned that this will stretch our LPD even thinner. Knowing what we know now, that towns around us, Acton, Concord, Stowe, are going through great efforts to keep marijuana and its money out, knowing that we can in fact go lower than the 20% threshold, would you consider as a board slowing down and maybe proposing that we limit this to 1? As a related topic, if you wouldn't mind telling me the steps and timelines of a citizen's petition. My friend Cindy Guidi wrote to you, Mr. Ansaldi, earlier, and she will be pursuing this option if necessary. But citizens' petitions are the path we least want to take. It suggests that we feel that our town officials aren't looking out for our best interests. 2 marijuana establishments without fully understanding the law is acting too quickly. How can you reassure us tonight? Thank
Okay,
you.
well, thank you for your input. We did get your email today.
Thank you.
And so you're on our radar screen. I will say 2 things in terms of follow-up. We have an ongoing effort with 2 members of our board, was it Chuck and Cindy, as well as 2 members of the planning board, working on regulations in the process we're developing to address the retail marijuana. But that will be agended again, I would think, within probably I don't know how soon you guys intend to be back, but the appropriate time, I would say, we're gonna agenda that topic again in the near future. If not the next meeting, then probably 2 meetings out, because we're due to address those. But as far as your characterization that either of these boards were acting without knowing what we were doing or whatever, I completely dismissed that. There was ample discussion before the planning board and the Board of Selectmen at that time. There was a lot of opportunity for public input, and the public input that we got was almost resoundingly support what the town voted for at the ballot. Now, perfectly willing to entertain any input before we develop regulations to that end, including, as you say, an opportunity to pause. But I just want to, I do want to reclaim that I think I speak for the planning board and the selectmen that when it was addressed eyes open and with an opportunity for public input. But we'll address it again, and in terms of process, certainly make Anthony available to you so you understand the procedures. If you're not satisfied with your opportunity to speak before the board and get your opinions heard or acted on, you certainly have your own means, and we'll give you that access.
I just have to say, as somebody who I have been concerned about this, and I feel that what was presented to us was always the state ratio, 20% of liquor licenses need to be, that's the lowest limit you can set, which was how we came to 2. I never learned until we started looking into it that, well, actually, it can be lower than that. We can, and I agree.
We
there
are
were
aware, and
discussions.
we are aware, and we're aware.
This board met with the planning board in an otherwise empty room to debate what direction we wanted to go as a town. And the options on the table were more than 2, right? We could permit more than 2. 2 is the state minimum, less than 2, 1, 0, a ban, so all of this was done repeatedly, agendaed multiple times, and we saw no one from the public who wanted to speak up and say anything about anything other than one way or the other, whether they wanted more or less. And so the basis for 2 there was sticking with A, what the town of Littleton voted for in 2016, and B, consistent with the frankly lack of feedback that we received, and third, consistent with what we had at town meeting, which was a resounding support for going forward in that direction.
That being said, it's not agenda tonight, so we do have other topics to get on, but it is gonna be coming up, it would be anyway in the next few meetings, so we'll, that's probably a more proper time for you to make your pitch more formally with all the parties present.
Okay, but as far as if she wanted to go through with the citizen's petition.
I addressed that in your email. Did you get my email today?
I did not, but
All right,
perhaps
when you go
Cindy,
back-
perhaps my friend Cindy got
Yeah,
this.
it's
Okay.
addressed in that email.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Great, thank you, Megan. Okay. Any other general topics not agended tonight? If not, I'll ask board members if they have updates. Selectman Knox?
Just quickly, because of time, I was able to attend the Magic Agricultural Forum in Box Road that we had an invitation to attend. Speaking at that was Cheryl Sabara of the Massachusetts Association of Health Boards and our own Brad Mitchell from the Farm Bureau. It was just a great chance to learn some of the things that go on between agricultural and how the Board of Health steps in and how conservation steps in. There had to be 50 to 100 people in attendance. It was well done, well worth attending, and I think that I had the invitation of going there. One thing that Cheryl pointed out as far as Board of Health goes, she said she was out in Albany, New York that same day speaking, and she was speaking to boards of health out there, and they were astounded that Massachusetts has 351 boards of health that can set different standards all through the state. They don't have that in New York at all. And they were just shocked at how much authority that boards of health have in Massachusetts, where they can set things at a meeting with very little input. So it was interesting to listen to.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? No. Okay. Selectman Gerbig?
I don't think I have any updates.
Okay. I'll wait for you to finish. Selectman Napoli?
I have a few. I just wanted to announce that the Veterans Corner received a $15,000 matching grant from the Veterans Heritage Grant Program, and I wanted to say thank you to everybody that was involved with that, the Friends of the Littleton Veterans. Chris Stoddard from the Department of Public Works was a lot of great help to me. Anthony was very helpful. The Police Union, the Room for Change Littleton Athletic Booster Association, the Legacy Committee, and the Friends of the Littleton Veterans have already pledged to match funds for that grant, so we've already have about $13,000 of the matching funds that we need to achieve the full $15,000. The Friends of Littleton Veterans are selling patriotic banners in support of the Veterans Corner project. They're going to be hung on the light poles lining Great Road and King Street pending Board of Selectmen approval from May 1st, 2019 through November 30th, 2019. If you'd like to sponsor a banner or purchase a banner, they're $300. And there's more information that can be found at the friendsoflittletonveterans.com website. The other thing I want to mention, Rick is here in the audience, is that there's been renewed interest in the Shade Tree Committee. Apparently, I think there's 1 or 2 vacancies on that committee, and I know I had mentioned this to Paul. I'm hoping that we can maybe bring that forward as an agenda item in the coming weeks to see if we can fill any vacancies on that board.
Starts with word of mouth.
Yeah, no, we had some really good discussions about it, all the way from implementation to funding sources, so, and we actually found a group that is willing to water the trees. So I'd like to see if we can revisit that in a couple weeks as a board. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund Committee meeting is, Board of Trustees are meeting tomorrow night. Just a reminder that there's a housing summit scheduled on March 12th at 7 at the Littleton at the fire station. If anyone's interested in learning more about affordable housing and the initiatives that we're currently working on, please put that on your calendar. Finally, 2 quick things. I wanted to congratulate the first-year Daisy's Girl Scout Troop 67517 for earning their Respect Authority Pedal with some help from Officer Meg Wodzinski this week. This is another great example of community policing by the Littleton Police Department. And also, I didn't know if everyone was aware, but Littleton has its first all-female troop formed through the Boy Scouts. I don't know if anybody had heard that this week or seen that this week on social media, but Troop 19 is welcoming girls ages 11 to 17. The troop official her name is Jennifer Kane, and they will be meeting here on Friday in the multipurpose room, starting at 7 o'clock. And anyone is welcome to come that is interested. There's no commitment if you do show up and just are interested in maybe joining the all-girl Boy Scout troop.
Okay.
That's it.
That's it. Great, thanks. I'm made aware that the Conservation Commission, your meeting starts at 7:30. So while we're not too bad on a schedule for what we're capable of, I'm going to ask the board if we take one item out of order and move right on to item 5 right now for the Lot 107 invasive species management topic. And Selectman Gerbic, I believe you have the floor.
So my goal here is to try and catch us up a little bit on time. Hopefully this doesn't take a lot of time. While Anthony's pulling this up, this is a lot that the Board of Selectmen has care, custody, and control of. It's off of Nagog Hill Road, adjacent to Nagog Pond. Number of years ago, the management of that area became more challenging because there are a lot of players who get inputs in what we do with that property. What we're looking to do is, over the last number of years, invasive species have really taken over this property. Invasive plant species, that is. And so in order to both improve the viewscape from Nagog Hill Road, as well as make it more accessible to the public, and just generally minimize the proliferation of invasive species, what the Littleton Conservation Trust is asking for is our permission, because we have care, custody, and control of it, to request permits from the Conservation Commission to clear the land. And what you see here, the top left, is what it looked like in 2003 In fact, it was the cover of the 2003 Open Space Plan. You see what it looks like today, 2012, and more recently. And so the proposal is not to bring it back to exactly what it looks like in 2003, because Concord has requested, we went through a number of years ago interacting with Concord because they have, they use that in part as a drinking water source area. Not clearing all the way down to the road, essentially, or down to the pond. Essentially, what we would be proposing, what we would be allowing the Conservation Trust to do is clear invasive species in a way that has no deleterious effects on the water quality and doesn't encourage people to go utilize that water because it's not suitable for recreational purposes. And so that would mean leaving a buffer of land that is uncleared between the cleared upland area and the pond. It would also involve mechanical means of invasive species removal, that is, no herbicides, no pesticides, which is a laborious process. And that brings us into, why are we proposing to do this now, or why is the Conservation Trust proposing to do this now? You can see in just a handful of years what it's grown into, and that's only going to get worse, almost in an exponential way. And there are volunteers from the trust who are willing to go out and do the backbreaking work of mechanically clearing those invasive species. So the process that we would go through would be, we would give the Conservation Trust the approval to apply for the permits from the Conservation Commission and to go forward and do this. That would then open up a public process where we've already sort of reached, several years ago, a tentative agreement with Concord, and that's sort of the basis of what's being proposed now. Mechanical clearing and nothing down too close to the pond. That process would then go through, and if we get it started now, you know, it's early February. Essentially, the best time to do this would be late winter. If it gets too far into the spring, it turns into a muddy mess. And so doing it now actually allows us to get it done this year. If we wait too long, then it becomes yet another year that we have to sit back and wait and do this. And frankly, we have the volunteers right now who are interested in doing that sort of backbreaking work. So this is not the public process to you know, engage in that. This is simply giving the Conservation Trust the authority to apply for the permits to do the work on land that we control.
Thank you, very straightforward. If you don't mind, I'd like to ask your former colleagues on the Conservation Commission a couple of procedural questions. I don't know who's chair or who's speaking for the board right now, but,
Amy's back there
okay.
somewhere.
Understanding the reasons Chase has stated for wanting to do this quickly, how quick is your permit process likely to be? And secondarily, does it involve a site walk, in which case I think the board, I'd like to be made aware of it so we'd have an opportunity to actually go down and take a look at it before it happens?
Sure, yeah, Amy Green, the conservation coordinator. The notice of intent for this was actually prepared a year or two ago, and then everything just kind of fell off the cliff and didn't go anywhere. So it's pretty much ready to go. And I assume once it gets submitted, I bet would have 2 meetings. Concord Water would certainly be notified at the very least because they're in a butter, so they get notified anyway. We have done a site walk with them before. People might want another one, so we'd absolutely let you know.
Appreciate it,
about that. So, yeah.
as the owners of the property.
Yeah.
But, yeah, and I mean, don't hold anything up for us, but if it's gonna happen as a matter of course,
Right, yeah.
please include us. Any other board member questions?
No.
Comments? No. Okay, any other comments from Conservation Commission?
No, I would point out that this was, invasive species management is a goal both of the open space and the master plan report, so.
Right.
And one of the amazing things is you can see the proliferation of invasive species around the area originating largely from this lot, because it's open, it was cleared before, and it was ripe for invasive species to take over. So it actually makes things more challenging, you know, up by the orchard and so on.
Sarah?
And it's really moved across the street as well, so it's really starting to take hold.
Oh. Okay. Any other members of the public want to comment on this? I noticed that there's a couple of our residents, Jeff and Mary Fura, were interested in this topic as well.
We live across the street, I will say, yes, it is hopping across the street. We've done a battle royale with these invasives for the last 5 years since we acquired the property there across the street. It's a beautiful location. I think it makes a lot of sense for the town. Of course, we have some self-interest as well, but we're also members of the Conservation Trust. And we're in our previous residence in Boxborough, so we're interested in, for the good of the town as well, making the sorts of improvements that Chase outlined, so sounds like a great thing to us.
Thank you. And since council, you're sitting right here, I'm guessing there's nothing here that impacts our friendly litigation with our Concord neighbors.
Not that I know of yet. I haven't actually dealt with this for you guys, but
Okay.
I met, Chase, have you spoken with Concord about this?
We haven't spoken with Concord recently about this, and I think the best way to go forward is really to keep it as a conversation between conservation agents.
Yeah, that's perfect.
And there's no reason it needs to be anything. other than-
Conservation without litigation. That would be-
Right.
I have a t-shirt.
Right. Okay. Any other discussion? If not, there is a motion.
Move that the Board of Selectmen authorize the Littleton Conservation Trust to file for the necessary permits from the Conservation Commission to perform invasive species management using mechanical means in lot parcel RO2-10-0, also known as Lot 107.
Second?
Okay, the motion has been made by Selectman Napoli, seconded by Selectman Gerbic. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
All right, back on schedule. We're back on track. Anthony, you want to address our obligations with the upcoming annual and special town meetings?
Be an honor. Just to go over the timeline, obviously, today being February 11th, it's the selectmen vote. Today, you'll be voting to open the town meeting warrant. We had no voter petition zoning articles, so there'll be none forwarded to the planning board. February 11th, the next two other meetings, the 25th and 11th, the selectmen will be voting to insert the articles into the annual and the special. On March 20th, town meeting warrant closes. On the 25th, you'll determine the articles of the warrants that will appear. And 26th, the town meeting warrant will be posted.
And again, a lot of this stuff is dictated both by statutory posting requirements as well as printing schedules.
Exactly. So in your packet, there was a list of some of the really reoccurring articles that we have every year. So they're out there right now. I'm continuing to work on them. We do have others that we will be adding to this list and inserting, and maybe changing some of the ones that are on there now, depending on outcomes in the next couple of weeks, few weeks. So tonight, I'd ask that you vote to open the warrant, but not on inserting articles at this point. We have two other meetings to do that.
Yeah, we'll leave that as a recurring item on the agenda for the next few weeks.
Yes.
Okay, great. So you get that, what the ask here is just for the first motion. Plenty of time to address the articles to be added later. Any discussion from board members?
I just wanted to make one comment or request. Just talking to some people around town, as we saw tonight too, with the issue of cannabis and some disconnect between articles and that were presented at town meeting and people feeling that weren't informed. Would it be possible to do sort of and I know we do this on LCTV, we present the articles that are going to be presented at town meeting, but could we do something in a community forum where we have an open meeting and invite people to come in and we review the articles that will be presented at town meeting and
Taking different stabs at that over the years in different forms. If you come up with an idea, I'm sure we'd be happy to do that.
Okay.
Whether it makes more sense to take advantage of our scheduled time that people are used to, or doing something on an off night, think about it and see what the input is out there.
Okay.
I mean, I think it might be interesting to schedule something during the day potentially, or, even something that's more accessible to
Right.
other demographics.
Yeah.
Like an informational session, or is it more
Q&A?
Q&A, or?
I think an informational session, but obviously people would have the opportunity to ask questions if they wanted to. And if, depending when we scheduled it, we could actually refer them to maybe some upcoming meetings
Right.
that pertain
Agenda
to that
items that'll come
particular
up.
topic,
So
so.
doing it sooner rather, but by the same token, we don't have the agenda set until, or the warrant set till the 20th.
Right.
Oh, you're envisioning doing something like a month out from,
I'm trying to, I don't know what
Well-
timeline would work.
Think about it.
Right.
I think we're open to it, but,
Right, yeah, I don't know how it would work with the timeline, so we need to figure that out.
Okay, yeah,
Okay.
I'm sure we're always looking for an opportunity. It's nothing more frustrating than you think you've done a million things to get people aware of a topic and
I know.
and then
Right.
they don't know what you're talking about, and you know what, it's your fault. And it is, it's our obligation
Right.
to get the
I
word
just thought
out.
it'd be something we could try it and
Yep.
see if it helps, so.
Okay.
Okay, that being said,
If you come up with something specific, just remind Anthony and I will get it on the agenda.
okay,
Cool. All right, then we do have a motion, anything, Mr. Max? A motion,
Okay.
please?
Just the first.
move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 39, Section 10, in Town Code, Section 41-1, to adopt the warrants for the for the Monday, May 6, 2019 annual and special town meetings forthwith, and to close said warrants on Wednesday, March 20th, 2019 at noon. Said town meetings will be held at the Charles Forbes K Gymnasium, Littleton Middle School, 55 Russell Street, Littleton.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made by Selectman Napoli, seconded by Selectman Knox. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the ayes have it. Okay. Getting closer to being back on track. 7:15, agenda item number 6 is a joint meeting with the Historical Commission. Our friends, welcome back to discuss the Baker House, 12 Robinson Road, which we purchased last year with the authorization from town meeting. And Anthony, do you want to set this up? Because I know you've been involved, and I know Ed Mullen, thank you for being here, has used his professional talents to help us assess where we're at in that building. And do you guys want to maybe
Yeah, since,
Speak to it.
since purchasing since town meeting authorized the purchase of that house back in May, it's just basically sat there. There is a lot of openings to the house and the eaves and around the foundation, so we had a little problem with squirrels, and we got 9 of them out of there, a few mice. But the bigger question comes up, and there was a question Linda brought, the roof leaking as that was happening. The roof does need the house needs some TLC. But that bodes the question, what do we do with the intent of the house? I know that there was a plan that was presented back before town meeting, and it's been a little over 6 months, 7 months, and it's sitting there, the power's been cut to it, the water has been shut off at the street, so right now it's just gonna be a dry house in there. So there's no heat, there's no utilities in that house right now.
Ed, you've physically inspected the building, you want to add
So I
anything?
went through as a member of the PMBC. When I went through.
Permanent
again,
Municipal
just-
Building Committee, for those that aren't into acronyms.
And when I went through, again, identified the same things that Anthony mentioned. Currently, the rodents are all dormant, it's too cold for them to do much damage right now. But there are several openings, the bulkhead is missing a threshold. The basement is currently dry because I think the ground is frozen, but you can definitely see that moisture does seep into the basement area. It was my assessment as a permanent municipal building committee member that it would be in the best interest from our board to, I know there's a deed restriction in place that is historically significant, cannot be
Is
demolished.
that, just to clarify, has that been,
Well, the council's here too, so actually, not yet, right, Jenny? It depends on the disposition of the property on how that works.
So, back to the recommendation I made to our board was that it get deed restricted, and then it get taken off the books of town and sold as soon as possible. So somebody that would want to restore it, whether, I don't know who that would be, but then keep it in good standing and also get it back in shape.
all right,
But not be a
Yes.
liability to the town.
well, There's one option. I bet you the Historic Commission might have another.
I'm sure
Might
they
have
do.
another thing. Anyway, so
So-
that's where we stand.
Yeah.
We did buy it, and you alerted us to it, and we are cognizant of its place in the town's history and its place in the town's, common area, pretty unique in that respect for its age. But if we're gonna hold on to it, or if we're gonna, dedicate it to a permanent use, we need to have a plan.
Yeah. So, before we get to that, I just want to address the more immediate issue of, we were told that someone saw water in the kitchen, leaking in the kitchen, but it sounds like you did not see that when you were there?
So when I was there, there's some water stains, but they're old.
Okay.
The roof isn't currently leaking, but it doesn't have much life left.
Right.
As a licensed contractor for over 20 years, I can tell you that it will be leaking soon, so.
Okay. All right, well, that was, my first concern was if it's actually water damage and water is leaking, but maybe sounds like that's not happening. So, and I have worked with Jenny a bit on deed restriction. So my understanding is whether the town continues to hold it or it's sold, it will have a historic deed restriction and it will be preserved, it cannot be demolished, and that's why the town bought it to.
Well, that was the baseline.
That was
But
the
there
baseline,
But there was a
right,
lot of
right,
hopeful
right.
talk about RFPs
Right.
for dedicated use and.
So, right, so the Historical Commission obviously has discussed this at several meetings, and our recommendation would be that the town before trying to sell sell the property to a private owner, that the town consider leasing the space to a nonprofit. There's at least one that's interested. We do have an example in town of a success story of this. The Littleton Historical Society has successfully been leasing the Houghton Building for many years now, and that's been a good relationship. The nonprofit.
Except for the roof. But that's-
Right. Some of that was, at least some of that, I believe, was paid with CPC funds.
Yes, yes.
So that's another option.
It's a contractor issue, I think, is.
Yes, right, yeah. But, conceivably, CPC funds could be used for some work on Robinson Road as well. From our discussions, we're thinking that if it was leased to a nonprofit, that perhaps the nonprofit could, hold events and be a venue to hold events and raise funds, and that some of those funds could be raised for maintenance as well as for operating expenses. So that's one.
Is there no longer any sentiment that you think there's an entity that might be interested in using the premises by an outfit that would have their own resources to do necessary rehabilitation and then make it a profit-making entity? 'Cause
Yes.
I know that was talked about.
Well, it would be, I think we always thought of it as a nonprofit group.
Okay, but
It's not-
any,
Right. Yes, I-
hosting functions and that sort of thing.
Yes, we are still thinking about that. Do you want to speak to that? Rachel's also
Sure.
on the historical commission.
Yes, so I know that I was part of the team spearheading that whole venture. So I had a conversation back in June with Anthony and Keith about how to go forward with that next step. And so we were told to kind of sit tight and that the Board of Selectmen own the house. You have to have public forums for the town people to come and say what they want to do with the house. And then RFPs would be issued and we could apply. So I know that we're very much still interested, but we haven't really, we don't have any authority to move forward on that plan. That's something that will have to be done through proper channels. But yes, that is still very much a goal.
Okay, I'll invite board comment in a moment, but I would say that we're at a time period where we really ought to be formalizing a process, inviting input, and if you need help, or if we need to form a separate task force that includes, your talents plus whatever else there is that would make for the best RFP, so that we can,
Yeah, absolutely.
we need to get on there, because I think we probably need to set some goals internally about timelines, about whether or not, we'll know whether or not that's gonna work. Yeah.
If council can just go over some of the different scenarios with that.
Sure, okay, and then Ed, I know you had something to add, and then I'll shut up and let the board members jump in, but council,
Okay. So.
might as well identify yourself
Oh,
to the
Jenny
crowd.
Yarrow, Marings and Harrington, Town Council's office. So just as you guys consider what you're doing with the property, that's going to inform our decision about how exactly to draft the preservation restriction. One reason why it's not on there yet is because right now, as owners of the property, if you're going to put a restriction on it, the town would be the grantor. Granting a restriction to someone else, we don't know who, promising what they're going to do, what you're going to do, what you're not going to do with the property. And you could then, in turn, put the obligations of whatever you're going to do on a tenant, say, you're going to lease out the property to someone. They would then need to comply with the terms of the lease and the terms of the restriction that you have put on the property. If you guys decided to sell the property, then I would suggest that you sell the property to someone and require them to convey a restriction to the town. So then the town would then be the grantee, where you could then say to the new owners of the property, you know, you must comply with these obligations in the restriction. So that's why we don't have a restriction yet, because we don't know exactly who's going to own the property yet. You'd also maybe draft the restriction slightly differently, depending on who's going to own it. You know, if the town was going to own the property long-term, you might make some of the provisions in the restriction a little less specific, because you know you can tell your tenant in a separate lease document what they can and can't do with it. And it gives you some flexibility to make changes to the property if you decide down the road you want to. Your grantee couldn't step in and say, hang on, you know, you can't do that. So, something else to consider while you're deciding what you want to do with the property. I think your two options really are to sell it to somebody who's going to do whatever you want with the property. You can draft an RFP to solicit proposals from people that, or organizations that want to use the property the way you would like it to be used, or lease it. And it's a similar process, really.
Right. Okay. Ed, you want to add something?
Yeah, so also as a building inspector going through the house and looking at all the accessibility requirements, fire protection requirements, depending on what you do with the house, there's a litany of things that can increase the cost exponentially, depending on what is decided to do with that house.
Right.
Again, looking at it from those eyes, that's why I made the recommendation to the NBC that it should not belong to the town, it should be.
Okay. Well, you'll automatically be involved in whatever committee we appoint, because your input is invaluable. Board members, what do you think?
I think we're under a huge time restraint here. The house isn't getting any better. It's just sitting there. We've already, we bought the house, but we're already incurring costs just to maintain it as it is. I think funding-wise, we have a lot of limitations, and I know as far as, issuing, trying to fundraise, or I don't know along what lines you were thinking, that takes time, and I just think the cost associated with bringing that house up to par, to the point where it could be leased or used functionally, it's gonna be, I think, a lot. I personally, I like the idea if we could sell it with a restriction so that we can get what we want from it in the end, and it won't be as cost prohibitive to the town, is my thought.
Chase?
One of the things CPC had said to us is when we used, when CPC used CPC money to acquire this, is that they were buying it with eyes wide open, knowing full well that some CPC money may need to go into work on the house, rehab on the house. My baseline preference is to simply sell it, but I would be willing to engage CPC to see what their willingness was in terms of expending a certain amount of money for historical preservation purposes. I think the best outcome for the town is we actually have a tenant there and it's not an albatross.
Right.
But I think that's a stretch. But if CPC is willing to put some of their money where their mouth is, I think it's possible that we could go down that path. The downside is that we could go down that path, spend a couple tens of thousands of dollars, and then decide we're still gonna sell it for $1. But I would be interested in engaging them in that discussion as well.
Okay. Joe, initial thoughts?
I'm glad Mr. Mullins here. I've done been on many home inspections in the role I play at our real estate office, and after reading through this, I don't think I've seen one quite like this ever. With the extent of work that has to be done is just incredible. I don't know whether it's worth the money to put CPC money into it. I think our biggest hope would be to find someone that would come in and buy it for a real low price and say, okay, I got it for this price, I know the restrictions the town has put into it, and I will do it that way. So in my opinion, I think the thing is to try to find someone to buy it, and, you know, we almost give it to them, but keep the restrictions that it's a historic piece of property and let them do it that way. 'Cause I can see us spending more than $10,000 or $20,000 just to keep it, so it's not getting penetrated by water.
Your roof will cost you $20,000.
Right.
You're already at that with just the roof. And again, the ceiling heights are less, I mean, I bump my head when I walk through every door in that building, so to do a tour or anything else in there, you gotta be less than 6 feet tall. It's not a functional museum house, anything like that. If we were getting an entity or even a homeowner to buy it and restore it and do, a twice-a-year museum tour of the home, we would benefit in that aspect, in my opinion. I've seen it done, I've worked for the city of Newton, I work for the town of Concord currently. There's several museum houses that exist throughout the state where they're open twice a year to the public, and the owners of the house, it's in their deed that they open up. There's ways to do it. So-
I would actually argue that the town benefits regardless of whether it's opened up to the public. The town benefits by preserving a historical structure. And keeping our history intact, regardless of whether it's ever accessible to the public on the inside.
I'll offer this, that I'll agree that in the end game, in a relatively short period of time, if we don't have a reasonable shot at a solution to preserve it within town ownership, or we don't have a reasonable solution to put an RFP process together for a sale to a viable entity, that we end up in that place at a date certain. But it sounds to me that since last spring, not enough time's been given to exploring those options. And, Historic Commission wouldn't be expected to have all those resources at command, but I'd like to suggest that maybe a little team be assembled and take 3 months to work through, until whatever, sometime in May, right after town meeting, explore whether or not there are parties out there that might be willing to come in either as a tenant or as a potential buyer to do any of those functions that would keep it somewhat open to the public and have the financial means to, to keep the building functioning and address the problems there. The community preservation ought to be a part of that, obviously. I'd love to include Ed, a couple members of the Historic Commission, and take some time. I'd like to volunteer myself for that. I know we've been handing out assignments, and I haven't taken one in a little while, so I wouldn't mind that. But if by May, say, so after a couple meetings, a couple weeks after town meeting, we don't come back with some concrete proposals, then we got to prepare ourselves for, I think we ought to look at the reality of putting the restriction on it and selling it. We always knew that was a possible end for it, but let's give it another shot to see if we can get it
Is there
done.
any restoration plan in place right now at all?
No.
No, okay.
But these things do take time, I'm sorry, this is not something that is completely new. I mean, there's, Boxborough just did this with Steel Farm. It does take some time. It's
Right.
not an overnight solution. I think they bought the property, the town did in 2011, and they're finally just opening it, and they're doing functions, and they're, Friends of Steel Farm
Right.
is running it. So there is this, we don't have to recreate the wheel of this.
No,
There's other
but if we take
things.
a few months'
Yeah.
time, and we're able to
Yeah,
come back with a detailed report that explores viable options, and we've spoken to actual entities who may want to participate, that's a ray of hope that I hope, like the board would consider, but absent that, we have to take the next step, so, that sounds like a reasonable approach to the
Very,
historic
very
commission.
reasonable approach. I think we should do it jointly. I think the historical commission felt like we don't have the authority over the property, so
Right.
we've sort of stepped back, but we don't really want to step back. We'd like to do a joint
Right.
committee like yours.
Well, I just think we owe it to ourselves, since that was an option that we had high hopes for, that let's go back and take another look at it. And I don't know if any other board member wants to join me in that. Everybody's averting my gaze, so. All right, well,
Since you were so gracious to volunteer me, I'd be happy.
all right, well, I wasn't even gonna ask you, Ed, you're an automatic on that one, but we'll contact CPC. Anthony, remind me on that, and if you folks can designate.
Chuck on it?
Chuck will help you.
Chuck has a new job, he's got a lot of responsibility. If he wants on, we can put him on, but let him make that decision. And if you folks can nominate a couple of members, that way, as a task force, we don't have to always be confined by open meeting, and we can kind of do our work, that sort of thing. All right, so good, look forward to it.
Yeah.
All right, good.
Any other discussion on this topic, or are we ready to move on?
We're on time.
All right, yeah, we're doing good here. I got a flight to catch.
So, if I'm correct, there's another item for the historical commission, Enoch Dole event. Is that on your agenda?
Oh, is this the Purple Heart
Yes.
ceremony? Yes.
Is that on your agenda?
It's not.
Oh, it's not.
Can we talk about it?
Sure.
Under member updates.
All right, yeah, I'll throw it under member
Well,
updates.
it's historic.
Right,
Oh, all right, that's a good point.
yeah.
Yes,
So I know Donna's been working on this.
Yes.
Yeah.
members of the crowd there, please.
Okay, Donna White, 5 Hartwell Ave, member of the Historical Commission. 10 years ago, I came before you and I asked for your support and endorsement for me to be able to bring back a hometown hero to Littleton, and that would be Superintendent Hannah Dodge. My goal was to have her written into the 3rd grade curriculum as Henry Thoreau is written into the 3rd grade curriculum over in Concord, to give the kids a sense of community, a sense of place. We have a hero. And you did that. And she is written into the 3rd grade curriculum. My other goal was to get a school named for her. That didn't pan out, but we did get a street named for her. Well, last spring, I was walking through the Main Street burial ground, and because one of the monuments there to one of our families had to have work done on it by the Cemetery Commission. And I was walking by there, and I happened to see this headstone. And it said, died at the siege of Boston, Dorchester Heights. Well, my degree is in history, and that just drew me immediately to it. I knelt down, and I pushed the grass away, looking for a Revolutionary War medallion, which was there, but it took work to expose it. And it was about this Littleton man, Dr. Enoch Dole. I want you to come with me, just very briefly. I know you're giving me time that wasn't planned for, but just for a minute, come with me. We all know this bitter cold that we all endured these past few days. I want you to come with me back to March of 1776 in that same bitter cold.
Was it that cold, Joe?
And Mr. Baby. So anyway, here we have the siege of Dorchester Heights going on. It's the dead of night. It is bitter cold, and we have Dr. Dole and 3 companions in a foxhole sitting there watching this young man go back and forth, bringing supplies to the front line. And they watched as best they could with the light that they had. And this young boy was hit. And you can almost imagine the conversation. When they saw him fall, Dr. Dole, Enoch Dole, who was a medical doctor, must have said to the others, "We can't leave him there. We need to go and get him." So the four of them got out of their foxhole, went over to this young man, and were trying to tend to him, and he had lost an eye. He had a terrible injury to his hand. They were hit by a cannonball. They all died, and their bodies fell on top of this young soldier. They saved his life. Their bodies protected him. My point is, they were all-time heroes. This is a story that needs to be told to our young people today. We have an all-time hero, Dr. Enoch Dole and his companions. And
What was the source, where did you find the information? Because obviously it's,
Tons of-
history written somewhere, but we've
tons of
forgotten it.
research. The Dorchester Historical Society thinks he's so cool. But anyway, so he's under the command of General George Washington. We have a Littleton person that served under General Washington. This story needs to be told to our young people and to the whole town.
Battle was where the cannons from Ticonderoga were brought down by Henry Knox in the dead of winter, and
Yes,
the
you've got-
British
you
woke
get
up
it
in the
across.
morning, and there they were, and that's when the fleet left.
Yes,
I'm a
yes.
history major too.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, good.
So, anyway, so George Washington hadn't thought of establishing the Order of the Purple Heart. That wasn't established until 1782. And he said that he wanted it to recognize meritorious service in combat. That's George Washington's words. So, anyway, what I'm babbling about is this man deserves his Purple Heart. This is the beginning of the Wounded Warrior program. He is the beginning of the line. And it continues on down to Spanish-American War, World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Fallujah, you name it. It's a continuous line. But he was at the beginning, and he needs to be recognized for that. And I would like your support to be able to have a program where he and the others get their Purple Hearts. And on August 7th, that's the day, it's a special day, it's National Purple Heart Day. Unfortunately, it's a Wednesday, so we would have to, do something that the whole town could be involved in.
Have you spoken with the Veterans Agent, John Borofsky, yet?
Casually, at the back of St. Anne's every Sunday,
Right.
but he said he's wonderful, and Cindy is
I know
wonderful.
Cindy's taking interest in this issue
Yeah, I
as
did
well.
mention this to John as well.
Yeah.
And I would like to have this made a big deal, a town-wide
Sure.
event. I mean, what other town do you know, not even Concord, has somebody that died at the siege of Dorchester Heights?
Well, we got Luther Blanchard too, right?
Well, Boxborough, but
Where's he buried?
well,
He's buried in Littleton, right?
well, that's true.
Yeah, all right, we got that. And he was shot, he was wounded at Concord Bridge, right?
Right, he was. He was. But it's just a fascinating history. And to have, our students, our young people have a sense of community. I'm proud that I'm from Littleton. We have Hannah Dodge. We have Dr. Enoch Dole. We are special. We may not be Concord and have all of the authors and everything, but we are special in our own right. And this story needs to be told and celebrated.
I think whatever we need to do to help you with that effort, I'm sure that we'll do.
Thank you. It is
And Cindy, you've already shown interest in if you
Yeah,
want.
I can certainly meet with you, and we'll talk about it. We'll
It's
come up with
wonderful.
something, yeah.
It's like coming before old friends again.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for.
Nice research.
for
Yeah, it's
teaching us.
great. It's a fascinating story. Thank
It
you
is
for bringing it
fascinating.
forward.
It is fascinating. He was only 33.
Okay.
Great.
Great,
I'll get in touch with you. We'll sit.
Thank you so
and
much.
we'll meet soon.
I appreciate that. I
Okay.
truly do. It's so important.
Great. All right. Next agenda topic is town building and space needs analysis. Specific topic, senior center discussion, and Selectman Napoli is one of our two appointees to run that project with representation. Well, we actually have a committee. I know Mark Ramack is here, George Sanders, I'm not sure, Judy Grandy's here, and I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody. Yeah, Marge, okay, great. Any event, floor is yours.
Okay, so, well, I think most everybody knows we have the Space Needs Working Group. We've been meeting regularly for some time now, trying to address the space needs in this building, specifically related to the town departments, the Park and Rec, the COA, the seniors. We know, have been keeping up to speed on the library project. Mark is, he is on that committee as well. So we have been moving forward. We retained an OPM, and I need to actually call on Mark for an update regarding the architects.
So Anthony, we have 4 applicants,
We have 4 applicants.
and we're going to interview them sometime tomorrow?
No,
No?
no. I thought it was scheduled for Thursday, but Kevin Heffernan ran into an issue that I believe he was gonna send an email, so we may have to push that to the
I
beginning
thought
of
it was
next
the
week.
12th, but anyway,
Yeah.
it's coming up.
Right.
Yeah, I think it was scheduled for the 14th, and then that's kind of a tough day for some
Right.
people.
Yeah, so I was a little gray on that piece of it, so
Yeah.
we'll straighten
I had
that
it on
out.
that, so.
I think Kevin did run into a scheduling conflict, though.
Yeah, and I don't think everybody picked up the
email.
copy,
Okay.
the proposals.
Okay. So that's where we're at as far as the Space Needs Working Group phase right now. We have 4 applicants for an architect. We're gonna bring them in. One of the things that we have been talking about, let me back up for a second. So we know that the library has their project that they've put forward. They're waiting to find out about funding in July. And so we're just waiting on that from the Mass Board of Library Commissioners. The other thing that has been on the table way too long, that we all are aware of, is space for the seniors, space for the Council on Aging. And so we have been talking about what to do for them and looking potentially at opportunities in Littleton. You know, what could we do? What could we do short-term? Could we go rent some space to give them some relief, to give Park and Rec some extra space? We just general discussions all across the board. You know, and so one thing that we really have been looking at is potentially the DCU building sitting up at the Common. It's just been sitting there for some time now, and there just seems like there could be some potential there. But so what we did is we went, and Liz is here, thank you for staying so late, I know you have small kids at home. But just talking about really the growing needs for the seniors, and we know that they've been growing, their population's been growing, but it's really gotten to the point where we need to finally do something, and we need to figure this out, because enough is enough already, in my opinion. So we put together in the packet just some, information. If you look at all the reports that have been generated since 2011, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All of them call for space for our seniors. Their population is just growing and growing, and Liz had actually graciously corrected me in this information in here regarding their population. It's not 3,300 by the year 2030, it's, what is it gonna be, Liz?
It's going to be 3,957.
Yeah, so if you just look at that, and if you look at what the COA provides, they provide so many services for our seniors. It's not just that it's a place for them to go play cards or hang out. I mean, there are medical issues that are being attended to, there's dementia groups, there's caregiver meetings for people taking care of their elderly parent. There's nutrition classes, nutrition support. All of the statistics are in the packet if you want to read through it. There's a living alone and living well group. There's a social club. There's a bereavement group. There's a social anxiety group. Blood pressure clinics, internet and computer classes, exercise and fitness, which is so important. These are important services that we need to provide to a significant population in our community. And we need to address this now. And I don't think that there's any need to have any conflicting with the library project and whatnot. But I wanted to bring this to the board, because we've had this discussion, but not really an in-depth discussion. But really figure out once and for all what we can do, what our options are, and let's address this issue. I just think it's time. And so that's why, we talked about bringing it forward and putting it on the agenda tonight.
A couple of thoughts, and thank you very much, Cindy, and thank you for the members of our Space Needs Working Group. I'll second or amen everything you've just said, and I think that much like some of the topics that Mike Zeldin spoke about earlier in terms of land use, building space things don't exist in silos and vacuums either. So at the very same time that the library project is a lot closer to, it's designed, it's waiting for the state to move forward. The town hasn't weighed in on the final vote on it yet, obviously, but the level of detail, the final decision on the appropriate end-use site hasn't been made yet for the senior center, but the topic is every bit as important to an important, large segment of the town, to the town as a whole, and I think consideration of this board is, how to deal with different projects that are on different places in a track in their, how close they are to being realized while we're making our financial planning, because I know there's been some anxiety, and I've been very attuned to it, that, is it the first in line that gets the money, and that's obviously not the appropriate way for us to plan our spending. So I hope that, while your group is getting the reinforcements and the professional expertise of the architect coming on board sooner rather than later, that as we approach this town meeting, that we not be in a vacuum, that these two important projects are coming down the pike, one sooner rather than later in terms of, I suppose, Mark, it's fair to say that once the state anticipated in July renders their decision, you guys are more or less ready to go on the library topic, and the senior center, it's probably whenever the decision is reached on the appropriate site, whether it's 255 Great Road, whether it's out back here or wherever else you're looking at, that's not far off either. It's once that decision has been properly vetted and arrived at. So I think in terms of what can we do as a board, it's to accommodate those timelines on parallel tracks, recognizing that there are different rates, and then to provide for the funding for it. And it was just a basic exercise to see what can we do, but I'm encouraged at the work that, Anthony was great help with, and Bonnie too, to provide information. Just to put a marker on the table that as we get around to figuring out funding, that if these are both identified as priorities of the town, to the extent that the town wants to vote them in, that we've at least explored a means of funding both of them using our debt program under the levy limit. It's possible. It may not be what either this board or this board in conjunction with the finance committee decides is the proper route, but it's doable. And hopefully that will help to do two things in my mind. One is end any notion that we've got to have I don't win unless you lose. Any of that kind of competition out there. We want everybody to buy into everybody else's program to the extent that they all help us make a better community, and then also that it helps calm some fears amongst the people. Ever since the January tax bills landed including at my house, due to the magic of valuations, these bills just seem a lot more painful this year than they have in previous years. And if we have the means, if we've received the message that these are two projects that, oh, well, they happen to be coming down the pike at the same time, and we've got the means to figure out a funding mechanism to address both of them, we should at least explore doing that so that we can settle financial issues and then get on to the more pleasant tasks of doing design issues and looking forward to ribbon cuttings and opening dates. So I'm not sure what you're looking in terms of a response tonight, but I did want to, we opened the discussion on that topic at our joint meeting with the Finance Committee last week. We by no means have exhausted it, and I don't pretend to speak for the board, but we need to more fully explore that piece of the puzzle. But beyond that, I guess all board members, I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts on where we are in the process, specific to the senior center. Chase, you?
I'm just very encouraged that we're bringing an architect on board. We've got an OPM ready to go to give us a much more concrete understanding of what the totality of our needs are and what the totality of our costs are to satisfy those needs.
Right.
And that's, I think that's what's been missing. It's not that there isn't a lack of recognized needs, but rather a lack of an understanding of what are our paths forward to satisfy those needs. So I think it's very encouraging to know that we're looking at, the DCU building as an option. That's great. I think we struggle with understanding, everybody's got their sort of back pocket calculation of what they think it's gonna cost to renovate here, what they think it's gonna cost to buy and renovate DCU, and that's why having the professionals on board to give us real numbers, and we can stop each coming up with a number that best suits whatever we think the outcome ought to be is.
Right.
And we can debate those hard numbers. So, it seems like a viable option. I have some concerns about the DCU building in terms of sort of the walkability. I want to understand, what are all the cascading implications of doing it off of this campus. But I think that's part of what you're going through. So
Yep.
the need is real. I'm glad we're moving forward.
Joe?
Everything that has been said, I agree with. I think, Cindy, you pointed out all the things that the COA does, and I couldn't agree more. And I love the idea, Paul, what you just said. The last thing this board or anyone in town wants to do is pit one thing against the other. That's wrong. So we want to go with both projects. I'm sorry to say that I've been on the board a long time, and we've kicked the senior center down the road for 10 years, saying, oh yeah, we're gonna, when the funding comes up in 2 years, we'll work on it. It's been long enough. It has to be done, whether it's a DCU building, whether it's out back, or whether we find something completely different. We just want to make sure we have, in my opinion, we have dedicated funds that go, put away, and can only be used for the senior center. And that's what I foresee right now, because we're early in the stage as far as the senior center goes. Just like was mentioned, the library's going a lot further. But if we don't do this now, it'll happen again and again and again. So we have some big projects coming again. If we can finance it the way you did, without hurting other departments and things like that, I'm 100% for it. But I am all for taking money and making sure that it's being put toward the senior center, and have the OPM take a look at all the different possibilities. And there might be more than just here and the DCU building. I know that Jimmy Carr, and I forgot who the third person was, 3 or 4 years ago, looked at that building back then in hopes, but maybe it's time to re-examine and do it once again.
Okay. I'd first like to hear from the other members of the committee, but we'll get everybody involved. But Mark, you're...
So, Mark Rambacher, 205 Hartwell on the Space Needs Committee. I agree with everything that said, like, let's take the funding separated out for the library and the seniors to make them on equal footing. I'm all for that idea. The space needs, actually, I'm frustrated with how slow the process is going, and I'm hoping, the hiring the architect will light a fire under us, and we'll be ready for something for October for the whole complex or whatever is going forward. Having said that, there's a lot of things the architect can't answer for us, and I don't know where we're gonna find the answers to. Like, if we bought the DCU building, what do we do about, like, some of the master plan type things, or what are the external costs, or, that type of thing, that I don't know where we find the answers to and how we expand to get those answers.
I suppose identifying the questions is at least, if you guys can get that part done or partially done, that helps us, move to the next phase. If we need outside help for that, or whether we have the resources internally to answer those questions, I don't know. But identifying that there are problems that the architect's not gonna solve is an important part of that. I know there were some other folks that wanted to jump in. Alan?
Space Needs Committee, and also an advocate for the senior center. What we need initially to do while we're looking at all these questions is to ensure that we have a placeholder on the warrant for the senior center. Now, whether that turns out to be an article written to buy the DCU building, or an article written that says we put 2.5 million, 3 million, whatever, away to start the senior center as another option somewhere else. One of those two things has to happen, because it's time now.
I agree. If that wasn't clear, I mean, that's kind of been my intention, is that while we're dealing with two different projects that are at different phases of implementation and actually have to be voted on their own merits, that to have articles that address each of them, where they are in the process, in their own individual process, on the warrant. So, yes, indeed, it's more than a promise. It's, dollars and cents in the bank for the senior project, which may take a little bit longer to be realized. And I think the library's a little more finite in what they're looking for at the spring town meeting. In terms of the next phase is, Mark, you want to explain that?
Yeah, well, we have a presentation coming up.
Oh, that's right, you will be explaining that, okay. Anyway, Alan, all right, I agree with you, Alan, absolutely. Talk is talk, putting money down, that's the marker. And, I think we're all interested in moving the process along as quick as we can while doing it right and not leaving important issues on the table while we're funding. Ed, you had something?
So I want to wear three hats in this conversation. One, as a citizen and a resident of Littleton, I support a COA building for our seniors. If you're talking 2030, over 3,000 of our members of our town are going to be seniors. That's 30% of our population. They need a place. They need it now. So now, as a PMBC member, I would make the recommendation to my board that that is a building we do want to own. Whether we use it as a placeholder for COA until we get a more permanent space, or we make that their permanent space, there's space available for other entities in the town to use that space as well. So it's a useful building. It meets the accessibility requirements. The age of the building, the maintenance would be much less. It meets a lot of the requirements that PMBC would look at. Third hat, planning board. We had a vigorous debate at our last meeting last Thursday, and we closed 2 public hearings for 2 senior residential developments. Outside of the bylaw, both of the developers committed to $3,000 per unit to be spent by the town, how the town sees fit. And it was brought up, I want to give our chairman credit, Mark Montanari, that he said he thought it should go to a COA establishment. So right there with those numbers, that's $96,000 that could come to the town through 2 developments for a COA building. So.
Good time to interject, that's great news, but apologize for not making note of this earlier. We've always encouraged the folks that are advocating buildings for their target populations to show good faith by doing their own fundraising. And I apologize if I get the numbers wrong, but I believe the library folks have already raised about $600,000, and the Council on Aging folks a couple $100,000. Friends of the COA. Thank you. So I mean that speaks loudly too.
I was going to see if Liz had anything to add.
Oh, sure, Liz, do you want to, Liz Tretiak, the Elder and Human Services Director of the town?
Yeah, we keep saying senior center, but senior center also comes with a bonus because the senior center falls under the Elder and Human Services umbrella. So you're not just getting services for seniors, you're getting a center that really is an asset to the entire community because we have a no wrong door policy. Anyone of any age or any socioeconomic background can come to us for help. So really, it's more than just a senior center where we can benefit the entire community.
Terrific, thank you. And that's your present operation under your stressed, cramped quarters. You're already trying to accomplish that mission. Thank you. Okay. Any other folks want to have? Mr. Sanders, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, George Sanders, 672 Great Road.
Do you have more than one of those shirts, or do you wash that? Every day I've seen you in the past month, you've had that shirt on.
Keep it clean, don't worry about that. I'm here advocating for the senior center. Transplant to this town, you know, about 21 years ago. And they have been, the Friends have been talking about a senior center when I came on board. And combined, it's been over 40 years that they've been kicked around. When I came here, they had one room upstairs, and they only got two now that you can call the center there. I think the fact that the DCU building is available, I hear people talk about, 10 or 12 years down the road, this, that. We don't need to be looking at 10 or 12 years down the road, because anything might come available during that time. What we need is something now, because we don't have anything now. And I'd rather have something now and worry about when we get down the road, 10 or 12 years down the road, that, who knows, we might be able to build a new center. But at least Littleton can claim to the fact that we had a center, and now we got a new one. But right now, we haven't had that first opportunity to say that we got a center.
Important point, thank you. Other folks? We've.
Well,
Okay,
I'll
yep,
just chime in a
Mark,
little
sure.
bit here, sorry, but I was thinking about it. But I have we have concerns, over whether or not it's the right place and whether or not, and so we're waiting for answers too. Because we feel it's our obligation as the COA group to look at the predictions and plan for the future, for the town. It wouldn't be efficient use of funds not to do that, I don't think. But I just want to, we had our board meeting today, and Barbara McCrae shared with us, and Liz shared with the board, that the event that's coming up this week that the Friends are putting on, when the word went out that people could call and sign up, 98 people signed up in one day. We are limited to 100 people. We have 30-odd people on the waiting list, I believe. We're turning them away. So the need is urgent.
Sure.
And so if we end up saying we're gonna even put money away, it's not gonna be meeting needs too quickly in that respect. So it was shocking to me that we knew the numbers were growing, but today was the largest, and the biggest volume that I've heard. And it was just an eye-opener. So I wanted to share that with all of you. That's what's happening.
Puts it in context.
We're turning seniors away.
Yep, we should be doing that, yep.
Yeah.
Yep, you're right.
No, and they're upset.
Okay.
They are upset.
Yeah, Joe?
Just one, if you took what I said, by putting money aside, I didn't mean.
For the future?
I didn't mean 5 years from now. I just don't know, maybe the DCU building isn't the thing, but something else can be done. I'm just saying, earmark that money. If it's not this, then we're gonna go with something else.
Okay, that's good, thank you. But because it really is, it's an urgent need now. It really is.
We get it.
Yeah, I just want to circle back around to a comment Liz made, that it's not, and I'm glad that you brought this up, because I'm guilty of it too. It's not just a senior center, it's an elder and human services. So it's really it's a human services building. Because like you said, there's many other people of different generations, demographics, that your department services, and we do overlook that a lot. We kind of put it to the back burner. And it's not to say, I'm sure that sector of your department as well is inundated. Aside from the growing senior population, you have a whole nother demographic that needs your department for many, many reasons that are important. The veterans agent, we had to move him out of that into a secluded part of the building. So there's a lot more needs there than I think I hope that we're finally getting the grasp of the whole situation.
Okay. Well, I think probably on the specific topic of the senior center we'll be looking for an update as soon as you folks have the architect on board and have an initial report to make once you have explored what that person can do and can't do, and identify some of those other issues. Meanwhile, we'll be working on some of the financing options. I see, Barbara, you looking to say something, were you? I'll always let you have the final word on something if you'd like.
Barbara McCray, 14 Copeland Road. I wasn't going to say anything. I was listening to everything because I want to really take it all in and see how people feel about how we feel. And sometimes I think that younger folks think that the seniors are sleeping, and we're not really. We're wanting to wake them up with things that we can do that would interest them, especially when they turn, guys, 60, you know? You're still gonna wanna do things, although I imagine in our future, there's gonna be a lot of these 60-year-olds, 65-year-olds and older working and probably don't have time for us, but there will be many who do. And we want them to have the proper facility to come to and be awakened with, you know, the other thing is we do a lot for our children's futures, and I'm for that. But I think we forget that the seniors still have a future too. At 60 years old, I didn't realize that I'd have 20 years of a future, and here I am 20 years later, and I feel like I still have a future. So, you know, I want to be active, I want to be with friends and people who talk the same language I do and kind of remember some of the things I do. And, you know, just stay healthy. We want to keep them healthy and having fun. And this is what I enjoyed about our lunches, who I mentioned today that some people say that a lot of the seniors come to our lunches because they're free food. I say they can have the free food, I don't care if that's what they want, but I also know that they're having a good time and a good social time. And they see their friends they haven't seen maybe for a month, and some of them a lot longer. So you've got to know, and you do, that I feel the senior center is so important for our town, and I want people to know other towns have pretty good senior centers, and Littleton's, I don't know if we're the worst, but to me we are. And so I just hope that everybody considers what we're thinking about. If it's the DCU building and things can be done to help us have a really super place there, we'll take care of the problems. We'll take care of that. And I think there's about this many, very few. So I'm not concerned about them. I know they'll be fixed. Thank you all, though, for, you know, thinking about us tonight.
More than thinking, help is on the way.
Yay.
Amen.
Good time to transition over to the library. Thank you. MBLC Building Project Update. Hello, folks.
Hi.
Rachel, how are you? Oh, I'm sorry, there was I missed, there was an anticipated motion on the last topic, and what is it? Anthony, get that up there?
Oh, if you want to go through with the RFP process to see about space for our senior center, the board can take a vote to authorize me to work with town council. We've had some discussions about this already, to craft an RFP to see what space would be out there suitable.
Is that the approach you folks are looking for us to take?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I've got to say, I'm not particularly comfortable with this. My sense is it ties our hands. Everything we just said was,
Right.
well, maybe the DCU building makes sense, maybe it doesn't. We just don't have any information to say one
Would it
way or
make
the
more
other.
sense to let
So-
you meet with the architect first, reconsider whether
Sure, we
that's the
can
next?
do that.
I know there's a need to get, it's good to get a marker on the table that we're doing something, but I hope
Yeah,
the
if you wanna
promise of
wait,
money.
yeah, because that's a good point.
Yeah.
It's right around the
It is
corner.
kind of limiting, and that dictates there's only one route we're gonna take, and it's an RFP process, and maybe it isn't.
Well, do we have to go through that process anyways, Anthony?
Well, it depends, if we wanna
Wanna buy it, well, if you
buy
wanna
an
lease.
existing building, yes,
Or even lease.
or even lease, but if we built out the back, no. So, we are closer than probably in the past.
Well,
I've
then
never
how about I
seen-
just add that, just to accentuate that this is to cover all possibilities, we'll proceed with the RFP to locate adequate space for a senior center if necessary.
Yeah, add that.
So it doesn't have to be done, but if a RFP is determined necessary,
Then why not just bring it to the board and plan on going forward with an
only
RFP?
because the motion is already here before us, that's all.
Well, so I guess how long would the RFP process take?
Yeah, see, I mean, that's probably a good as argument as any,
Yeah.
why don't we pull that question in after you've had a chance to huddle with your architect? That person might even have input as to what an RFP.
How it should be crafted
Right.
or whatnot. Okay.
I mean, don't interpret that as resistance to
Yeah,
it.
no, that's fine.
Yeah,
No,
let's,
and I don't mean this as resistance
No,
to
yeah.
spending
Yeah,
the
I'm
money
not-
to address the seniors' needs. I want to be sure we're going about it in a way that's most likely to give us the best outcome.
right, okay. If that's the vote we need to do, we can do that at the next
Yeah.
meeting. In the interim, let's
Okay.
let you guys regroup. Great. Thank you. Welcome.
Hold on, let me just pull this back up, like, so, yes, Jenny, thank you.
Eight slides, I count.
When I first opened that 240-page packet.
All right. Yep, go right ahead, whenever you're ready.
Hi, I'm Demetra Taylor, 115 Taylor Street, and I'm the chair of the Reuben Hoare Library Trustees. I want to thank the Board of Selectmen for letting us come onto the agenda tonight and speak to you about the project. Tonight, we're going to tell you where we currently are in the process and where we hope to be by the end of the year. So we're not here tonight to tell you why we need a new library, but we did want to remind the community of our mission statement as to what will a new library building give to the town of Littleton. And our mission is to provide the town with a multifaceted community resource that offers many services intended to improve and enrich life for every member of the community. Simply put, a building for the entire community to serve the needs of the entire community. We have been actively working on plans for this new library for over 10 years. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through the entire timeline here, but as you can see, you can get an idea of what we've been working on over the years. I do want to bring your attention to 2017. During that year, at the May town meeting, the residents voted to proceed with the MBLC library grant proposal. We submitted the application, and that July, we were awarded a $5.8 million construction grant. We were put on the waiting list, and we were number 7. Fast forward to 2019, today, we are number 1 on the wait list, and we expect this grant this July. So where are we now? We are first on the grant wait list. This could happen as early as July 2019. We anticipate it will happen in July. So let's take a look at what we know about this building. We know that this building is going to cost $13.1 million. We are not going to pay $13.1 million. What we are asking for going forward this year is in May town meeting, we are asking for about $1.5 million in design funds. And the reason why I say about is PMBC is currently working out the specific figures, and we do not have them at this time. And why do we need design funds? Design funds will buy detailed plans to make us bid ready, to get the ball rolling so we know exactly the number for the October town meeting to tell our residents as to how much this building is going to cost the town. Yes, thank you. So, in July, sorry, back up. So here we have a step-by-step timeline again. In May, we asked for $1.5 million. This is to work on the current schematic design. We want to get community input on what our library should look like and what the interior of the library should look like. We want to provide a building that is sensible and fits the needs of what this town needs and wants. Once that design is approved, we have our hired architect and OPM work on the final construction and engineering plans. Then we come to town meeting in October, and we vote for whether or not we're going to go forward with this building. And if we have a yes vote, the bidding for the contractors begin, and the construction begins. So from approval of town meeting to the start of construction, we anticipate this process to take 1 to 1.5 years.
To be sure, approval at town meeting as in approval of design funds at town meeting?
That's for May.
Okay.
And then October would be approval to go forward with the construction.
So in this timeline, construction would start mid-2020,
Yeah, it starts sometime in 2020.
roughly?
So you're all looking at this and you're thinking, okay, we have a grant, but this is a $13.1 million building, and even if you subtract the cost of the grant, that to me is too much money for a taxpayer to pay. Well, we have been fundraising for the past 2 years, and our fundraising efforts have been fruitful. We have a $1 million fundraising goal, and as of today, we have raised $627,016. We have received 470,711 actual donations. And then with our fundraising campaign, #BuildingCommunity01460, we have received $156,305 pledged if a new building is voted for the town. We have received donations and pledges to, for 8 areas or rooms in our new library building. But in addition to all these personal donations and pledges we've been receiving, the fundraising committee is also putting on different fundraising events to raise even more money. Last year, we held a mini golf event and we raised $15,000. We will be having our second mini golf event coming this March. So mark your calendars. On the 22nd is an adult night, and then on the 23rd is for the families. And
Again, it's in the current library.
in the library. And we
space,
have
right.
sponsors, and we have food trucks coming in, and a Ben and Jerry's ice cream truck. And this is an opportunity for the community to come into the library and literally play mini golf in there. And we had a wild time last year, and it was a lot of fun, and we invite you all to buy your tickets. It's coming up soon. So here is a proposed library project cost breakdown in 2020 dollars. This includes inflation costs. These numbers were made in 2017. So you see on the left here, we have the grant from the state. Subtract that from the $13.1 million. Then subtract the proposed $1 million in fundraising we are working on at this moment. We are also going to be reimbursed for a lead grant of $150,000. And we also own the land that we are putting the library on, so we do not have to pay $115,000. What we are asking for is in May, the design funds at $1.5 million, and then October, $4.5 million. There's been a lot of talk in town recently how people have felt like they aren't informed and these projects get pushed through the town without any knowledge. We encourage people to visit our website, to email us, to come to our meeting. I want to point out that I do have an error on this slide. Last week's meeting, we met at 7:30 because of the townwide band concert. We don't meet at 7:30. We meet the first Thursday of the month at 7 o'clock in Town Hall, room 307. If you have any questions, we have members of the trustees here. We have Sarah Rombacher and Judy Grandy who have been working on the fundraising, and we welcome you all to ask questions at this time.
Great, thank you very much. Folks, questions? Sounds good, doesn't it?
So I have one thing to add on the warrant. You had us listed in the annual town meeting. We need the money in the special town meeting so that we can hire the architect right away
Right.
to get the funds, so that we can know the cost in October.
Anthony, make a note of that, I assume? Thank you.
We're already working with PMBC. They're well aware of the project. They're working to put out the RFQ for the architect to hit the ground running in May. There's still their decisions on how to go forward with the project, whether to hire an OPM or go CM at risk, and I have no idea what any of that means, but they're driving all of that, and we're just, pushing forward.
Okay.
So.
Cindy?
Sure. Do you guys already have an OPM, right, Mark?
We do not currently have, so when we did the schematics, we had an architect and an OPM.
Okay.
Those contractors, effectively, they're expired now.
So you need to
We're
get
all
a new
done, so
OPM.
we're going through the whole process again. So what we did back in 2017 was schematics.
Okay.
And now we're going to do the whole process to go from schematic to design.
Design, right.
So,
Has there been any discussion about using some of the fundraising funds to offset the costs of the design?
we have not talked
Funding.
about that as trustees. We're waiting to figure out what happens with the funding in general. So in May, we're asking for roughly 1.5. We could potentially offset some of that if it comes to that.
Right.
We prefer in May not to go to an override. If we have to go to an override in October, then we'll deal with it then, but 2 overrides seems excessive,
Right.
so.
So depending on how the financing works out.
When and how to incorporate
We
their
will
money,
work
we'll have
with
to
you
figure
guys and
that
with
out.
Okay.
FinCom to figure out the financing.
I would be very interested, if you're asking the town for, the town share is 7 million. The trustees and friends have 1 million. I would be interested in seeing essentially 1/7 of the
We can,
design funding to
we can work it out, yeah.
Okay.
part of that.
And so then the other question too is, once you get the design in, the cost, it might be a lot more.
So what we know right now is, when we did the schematics, we had an independent cost estimator that came up with the cost being $13.1 million in 2020 numbers.
Okay,
We do not know if the 2020 numbers are still real or not.
right,
Right, so when we come to October, part of the reason to do the design now is we will know if it's 13 or 12 or 14 or whatever the number will be.
right.
So the point is to get on the ground running so that when we come in May and asking for the construction, we're not gonna come back later and say, no, we misestimated,
Right.
right?
And so in that regard, you'll come in October with a bid in hand. In other words, it will be a hard bid.
I don't know on the bid part, but we will have a firmer estimate. I don't know, I mean, the bid I don't know how that works from, just procedurally with PMDC and things
Will
like
you
that.
chirping to get in here, Sam, will you? No? Okay.
So, I mean, certainly that would be the ideal structure in my mind. The fire station worked really well because we had a bid in hand. We went to town meeting and then, they broke ground on it less than 2 weeks after
Right.
town
I will
meeting.
defer to PMBC on how any of that works and if we have time to be that far along. PMBC is going to be driving a large portion of this project now. We're going to be saying, how we want the building to look, but they're going to be
But
driving.
you're already in dialogue with them, are you?
We have been to their
Well, then
meetings.
perhaps you want to pursue that topic with them
Yep,
specifically.
we can work on that
Yeah.
for October.
Do you have an assigned member?
Myself and David Sill are PMBC for this.
You're on
We're on
PMBC?
for
Oh,
this
okay.
project, so we have been, but we've only started this like 2 weeks ago with them, so.
Right, okay, good.
Both are questions.
Sure.
Yeah. The $13.1 million cost estimate, do you recall off the top of your head if that had a contingency in it?
I believe it did, but we can send you the cost estimate if it's not in your packet. I don't know how to read them, so.
It did, okay.
I'm pretty sure it did.
So the reason, we came up with the 1.5 million number by taking the professional services part of the contract, or the estimate, adding their inflators on and saying that's 1.5-ish. But there's things in the professional services that may not apply at this stage, like we don't need a clerk of the works now. And I'm not a professional in this area, I don't know what we need, so PMBC is going to go through and say, do a better job of figuring out what that number really will be. So.
No, my question was really how much certainty can we have that the 13.1 is still a reasonable number? And the fact that it was escalated to 2020 and the fact that it's got a contingency in it makes me more comfortable that 13.1 is in the right ballpark.
And just to clarify, the 13.1 also included, if you went back to the slide with the pie chart, it included little over $100,000 to buy the land. So it's really a $13 million project with that, but everyone knows the $13.1 million number, so we subtracted that out when we did the presentation.
Yeah, sure.
There's some folks in poll too.
Jenna, you
Yeah,
want-
Jenna Brownson, I'm on the board. I just wanted to mention that there will be 4 information sessions for the community to hear about the project. They are on Saturday, March 16th from 3 to 5, the LPD. Wednesday, March 27th from 7 to 9, the Cooper Room. Thursday from 10 to noon in the Cooper Room, and then Saturday, the 27th from 7 to 9. In structuring these dates, Sam wanted to make sure that we had weekend dates, morning dates, evening dates, afternoon dates, in the hopes that that will be able to attract people who don't want to drive at night, or people who can only go out at night, or can only free themselves out on the weekend. So these will be posted in lots of places so that the public is well aware of the fact that we want to share how the project is unfolding, and to hear input from the community. And the hope is that they will be all filmed, but it's going to be dependent on LCTV's availability.
Thank you. Diane?
I'm Diane Dickerson, Bruce Street. I have a question. What if the town approves the $1.5 million for design in May? Coming up to October, the town rejects the 4.5. What happens to the money that's been raised in fundraising? Does that reimburse the town for the design part of it, or how does that work?
So the money that's raised for fundraising, so there's 2 buckets. There's the cash that we have on hand, and then the pledges. The pledges, it will be up to the donors whether they still fulfill their pledge or not, because that was contingent on the new library. The money we have is in the trust, is under the control of the library trustees, and we'll figure out another use for that to benefit the library or the space needs we have, right? So the money that we have in hand doesn't go away, the pledges may.
And was your question also addressing if design money was voted in the spring, but the construction money not voted? Well, I think it's fair to say whatever has been spent, and it's gone, and that's, yeah. So.
I have a
Anita?
question as to, you're pretty well guaranteed the money from the state because of your grant.
Yes.
And that's probably gonna come through. Is there a time frame that the town has to vote the additional money, or you will lose that funding? I mean, that grant money, is there a time constraint where we have to vote yes or no?
So July, when we receive notification that we are now ready to get this grant, we have 6 months from receipt of communication to have town vote and approve this. If we do not have this project approved, we're looking at another, 5, 7 years before we can?
It's a,
More longer.
so
Longer?
it's a long, if we don't get the money now, it looks like the next round where we'd be getting the money from, could get in line for money from the state is at least 10 years, if not 20, out. So right now, we're in the MBLC grant. We are the first community on the grant, and we are probably the only one that can get money right now until the state issues a new bond, right? They want, there's an, the legislature wants to, MBLC wants to expand the bond, allocate more money, and be able to award more libraries money. If they keep going at their current rate, it would be it's like 10 or 15 years before they can go through their current wait list. Forget going through another round, which we'd have to go through. So right now, I think we're the only library they have enough money for on their current bond.
Okay, great. Mike?
Mike Zeldin, Low Street. This is old stuff, but there are, what do you call it, strings attached to the state money. To what extent do they sort of lock you in? Is the use of those funds so fixed? In other words, their money, therefore the library has to have X, Y, and I want to understand, A, is there any possibility that you could have overruns, and I'm going the other way, that is more than 13.1, not because the state has mandated, but because the town feels that something is necessary to, as it were, make the library more successful. What I'm asking is, what is the impact of the requirements, the strings attached by the state?
I don't think, okay, so.
On the design, in other words, on the design, on the, shall we say, the inventory, in other words, the money that has to be spent on the construction. How many, what is the level of strings attached where you're so locked in that the design and everything else with it must follow a pattern that has you, as it were, heading in a particular financial direction?
So I'll try to answer, and Sam can correct me when I'm wrong, but the money from the state pretty much says that we're going to build a library on the slope site at roughly the size that we're planning, right? They might, I don't know if they require the room, like the certain area for the children's room or not, but I don't think they do. They require the money to be, they require the building to be a library for 20 years, right? And I don't think there are other restrictions, right?
No, it just has to go on that site, because that's where we said we're gonna put it. It has to be the 22,000 square feet that we said it's gonna be, and it has to be a library for 20 years.
If we build a bigger building, if the town decided to build a 30,000 square foot building instead of 22, our grant stays the same, right? The town would be on the hook for the extra money.
Right, exactly.
And could you guys describe the process that you generally envision for that rework with community input is what you call it? What would that look like in your mind as we finalize what the final design looks like?
So I would imagine before when we were going through the process for schematics, we had public meetings and we set up a committee basically to ask for input on what the library is. We'd probably hold open meeting, not informational sessions and things like people can come in and say what they want in the library, what they liked in the old plan, what they'd like to see different. We have feedback from MBLC on what they wanted to see different from what we had proposed. So we will work with an architect to try and meet what the public wants and what MBLC wants. And I mean, I don't know how many iterations it'll go through, but I would assume multiples based on the process we had before. So.
All right. Yes?
Less formal than all that, but even if you came to the Friends of the Library at the Third Thursdays or the Country Fair, we had a board up with some pictures of other libraries around, and we had people putting up Post-it notes saying, you know, they like this is what they'd like to see, and I think that's the kind of input that will help us guide what we end up with.
All right.
I have one more question.
Sure, Cindy.
This question's been bounced around before. Say there's a group in town that charges money for a program. Say like Park and Rec charges money for a program. Can they run that program at the library, under the grant?
Yes. So the state gives us, the state's requirements are we build a library of roughly that size,
Okay.
and it's a library for 20 years. The use of the rooms in the library is not mandated by the state as far as the meeting rooms. That's controlled by the policies of the trustees.
Okay,
Currently, we have policies that say that for-profit entities can't use the room for profit events.
okay.
Right, if someone has an issue with the policies, they're welcome to come to one of our meetings, present their case, we're
Case by
open
case
to,
basis.
we're open to changing the policy as needed or granting waivers, depending on the circumstances.
Okay,
And we've always allowed Park and Rec to use the Cooper room. and-
yeah, that was just like a hypothetical, okay. Right,
All right, any other questions for library trustees? Terrific presentation, exciting time. We'll be working with you on process and funding and all that sort of thing.
Buy your mini golf tickets, they're going
Yeah.
fast. A lot of food vendors on Friday, so.
I tried that as a youth, it'd be calling Sergeant Hollingworth.
It was a
and they'd
blast
get you
before we
thrown out of
changed
here.
the town's policies.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Jenna had her way, it'd be even more fun.
it's the same one.
All right, we have two topics left. Anthony, I know next we have the town administrator and director of finance and budget / town accountant discussions, and then your two updates. I'm wondering if part of the town administrator discussion might qualify as negotiating strategy, whether we might want to consider doing that in executive session.
We didn't post for that.
I mean, if we, do we need to, as long as we, follow the rules on that?
Actually, our town clerk's here, maybe she can give us a little guidance on that.
So,
Madam Clerk?
under the rules of executive session, I mean, I'm not certain how you can consider, I mean, I'm not certain which part you're saying that you believe should be put under executive session.
Ongoing or upcoming negotiating strategy for the town administrator?
Well, I mean, if
I don't have any doubt that what we'd be talking about would certainly qualify, it's just the notion that we did not post it as a intended executive session.
right, so that's kind of a,
Or we can go forward without it, and we just might be a little limited in what we can discuss. Try it, huh?
I'd put it under the executive session, when we get to that one section, because it does have to do with
Yeah.
negotiations, and you don't want to.
The other thing I was gonna suggest is we take things out of order, have Anthony cover his items first, and then we can talk about Director of Finance and Budget, and then go into the town administrator last, and if we find we're in a position where we need to go into executive session, we can do it, and if we don't have to do it.
I agree.
Okay, yep.
All right, okay, so we may not get there. We're just gonna take things out of order, and if we can resolve it without going there, we'll try to do that.
okay, so the only problem that you have is that you've posted it as an open meeting, which people are here probably
Yeah.
to discuss it with you.
Yeah, well, we'll do that part of it.
Okay.
But if we're gonna go to,
If you're talking about negotiations, I mean, I guess you could state that and.
And then go in.
right. I mean, it's not always possible to anticipate in advance when you're gonna trigger an executive session, and as long as we're following the rules, I think that's what we wanna make sure we do.
I'm looking at the guidance right now, and my quick read is that we're
Okay.
okay.
Yeah, okay, and if we don't need to do it, we won't do it, but, all right. Well, and anyways, to accommodate everybody, we'll cover all the open session stuff first, so, then why don't we go to 8, I guess it'd be 10 A and B first, Anthony,
Yeah,
right?
first thing, just kind of going off subject myself here. With tomorrow's weather, Chris Cottage has been texting me. They're talking about maybe an inch an hour snow between 4 and 7, so I think everybody should stay tuned to the website and so forth in case we need to close the building early tomorrow and
Schools
cancel
are
our
already
meetings.
closed.
The schools already closed?
I'm sorry, not closed, they're closing early.
Okay.
Closing 3 hours
So-
early, last I heard.
As long as my flight gets off, the rest of it.
Yeah, you're good, yeah, so just for the community, just to we'll post it on the website as well as social media platforms. Okay, so the first thing is, we have a request to use Littleton Common by the Littleton Country Gardeners. They're looking to use it on May 11th, from 8:30 to 2:30. They'd actually like to get in there and set up on May 10th, a little before the event, to do a little setup. They're requesting that we add them to our insurance binder. That would be an additional cost to the town. It's really small money. I think we could get it for maybe $150.
Do we normally do that?
Well, yeah, so anytime they hold an event, we've always,
I just mean this garden club thing is an annual thing. Right? Do we always give them the insurance?
actually, I don't know about
We've
last year.
always been covered under the umbrella
Yeah, it's
policy
always,
for this.
yeah, and it's a little different now that the, Maya wants it to be, well, you gotta just purchase a little bit extra for $150 to cover that day. You know, my recommendation to the board is, they've used the common every year, and as far as the $150, I considering all the good that they do in town, I think it's
Oh, yeah, no, I just was curious, I don't remember that insurance piece. That's
yeah, it's new, it's Maya's new, so I'd recommend that we pick up that cost.
Any discussion then on the topic here, giving country gardeners their usual access to the common?
No.
All right. Hearing no further discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
Move that the Board of Selectmen approve the use of Littleton Common for the Littleton Country Gardeners Annual Plant Sale on May 11th, 2019, from 8:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m., including setup on May 10th, 2019. In addition, authorize the Town Administrator's Office to add this event on the town's insurance policy with Maya.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made by Selectman Napoli, seconded by Selectman Knox. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. There you go. Anthony.
And the second thing that we have on, in light of some of the changes that we're gonna be seeing in the finance department with Bonnie moving on to become the finance director in Carlisle, is we have an opportunity to participate once again in the Community Compact Program. I've spoke to local services. Two of the best practices that I think that we would have a great shot at getting a grant anywhere between $25,000 and $50,000 is for a true capital improvement plan and the financial forecasting. So what we would do is, once we got those funds, we could hire the Collins Center, which we don't have to go out to bid because they're a state entities, so, and they do this for other municipalities too, and they work with the town in developing a true capital improvement plan and also a true financial forecasting plan. So before we even go through the budget process next year, we would actually do that financial forecasting to kind of lay out the future and where the economy is gonna go and what we should take into consideration when we're building the budgets in the future. So what I'm asking is the board to allow me to apply for that community compact with those two best practices.
First off, I applaud your initiative, Anthony, in seeking this out, especially knowing that we're entering a period of transition there, and it doesn't cost us anything to apply, obviously, and it can be helpful no matter who are in those positions. I think maybe we have a joint meeting with the Finance Committee on the 25th?
25th.
Yeah, okay. My inclination would be to authorize Anthony to go ahead and apply for both of these and then prevent an update on the 25th.
I think that's perfect.
Yeah. And if you haven't already, let the other members of the finance team know, what you're going after, and
Will do.
they might have, they probably do have a lot of ideas that might be helpful in preparing a list of ways that these folks can help us out. We have a motion there as well.
Ready?
Yep.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to submit an application for a community compact with the Baker Polito administration for 2 best practices. 1, prepare a capital improvement plan that reflects the community's needs, is reviewed and updated annually, and fits within a financing plan that reflects the community's ability to pay. And 2, develop and utilize a long-range planning forecasting model that assesses both short-term and long-term financial implications of current and proposed policies, programs, and assumptions over a multi-year period.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made by Selectman Napoli, seconded by Selectman Knox. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. All right. 9, 2 vacancies. Again, we'll take them out of order that they're listed here. The Director of Finance and Budget, which is technically, and first and foremost, the vacancy is town accountant, right? Anthony, you want to speak to what our process consideration should be here?
Sure. One thing that the Mass Municipal Association has identified that one of the harder positions to fill is in the finance world for municipalities. A good finance director is tough to come by. I think our immediate need right now is that accountant role. And we went through this in Brookline when the finance director left. We said, you know, the finance director doesn't have to necessarily be the town accountant. It could be the town treasurer, it could be even the assessor, depending on.
Well, that's how our bylaw works too, right?
Right.
You can go to any.
So, you know, I would recommend at this time that we look at working a new, update the job description to just the town accountant and fill that position, knowing that Steve Venuti has expressed that maybe he may have another 1.5 years left. So we may be looking at a treasurer, and then at another point in time, we can assess the whole finance director position. And then as far as even the budget, I think that that's something that we could look at, maybe originating with the town administrator and the financial plan, which eventually FinCom, it's FinCom's budget that gets adopted and sent on, that's what town meeting votes on. So my recommendation right now would probably be to go on the role of let's post for a town accountant.
Okay, I do know Ann is here, and since she is our HR expert, just want to make sure we're not going awry here. There's two components to the position, at least as Bonnie fills it right now, town accountant, but then also the designated Director of Finance and Budget, which are 2 separate appointments under the statute. So I just didn't know if you had any comment or advice on what Anthony just said and what we're considering.
I think I agree with what Anthony just said. In fact, Bonnie was the town accountant when she was hired, and we
Yes.
actually have that job description in hand. Obviously, always a good time to look at it and see if it needs to be revised, but, and it is the important position that we need by statute to fill.
Right.
So, I think that's a fine plan.
Okay. So essentially what's on the table then is to draft, I hope as soon as perhaps the next meeting, a proposed job description for town accountant, using the old one as a base. Work with Ann on that.
Yeah, I think we can bring some back.
And develop a longer-term plan for the other half of it. Chase?
Anthony, would you mind to put your thoughts down in just a quick memo? I want to see where the moving pieces are. This proposal, wasn't really something in our packet, and I want to,
Right.
I want
Yeah,
to
it was-
think
it was
about
a-
it
yeah,
a little bit. It seems to make sense to me, but
Right.
Okay.
I'm not prepared
No.
to bless it.
Enough,
Yeah, that's
the memo is very much in order, because there's town bylaw, there's statute.
Right.
And there's the reality of what's going on. And, but at the bare, I don't think there's any reason to say, hit the brakes on developing a job description for the accountant.
No,
for our
no,
next
I have
meeting.
no problem with that. The shifting around, I want to think about for a second.
Yep, pretty soon we'll be occupying desks in there if we don't fill a couple of these positions. I'm not looking forward to that. All right. Okay, I don't know if this requires a vote. I mean, you get your directive there, I mean, a memo on it, and and also a revised job description, at least scheduled again for our next meeting, and hopefully we'll be in a position to act on the first phase of that then.
Yeah, we'll do that for the 25th.
Okay.
Anthony, when you do that, could you attach to that memo or just send us the current job descriptions of the Director of Finance and Budget and I guess the old town accountant one? I just want to see where we're at on those.
Yep.
Or maybe Ann, if you wouldn't mind to send
We
them.
can do that.
Okay, all right. Then moving on to the other piece of town administrator, let's see how much of this we can accomplish in open session. With the withdrawal of Steve Sadwick, we discussed at our last meeting, I guess it was our last meeting, process for approaching one of our other finalists. And Chase, you made the initial contact there, and maybe you want to update us where we're at.
Well, I'll update in a second, but I guess one of the things that we're sort of trying to move forward simultaneously is understand, frankly, part of why did things break down with Steve, and I think we need to do a little more homework to understand what the market is giving in terms of contracts and contract language. You know, I think we had touched on that, but that ultimately is, I think, part of why we broke down a little bit.
Getting into detail on that also begins to get into the negotiation
It does
strategy,
get,
too.
no, and I'm not talking about with respect to a specific candidate, and that's why I do think we should spend a few minutes in executive session, because we, I think, as a board, need to discuss broadly, independent of any candidate, what types of things are we willing to address in contracts, and we don't want to do that in a public session, because now we're telling whoever we may hire where we're willing to go or not go.
Right.
As far as specific candidates, which is the question you asked me to address, we've reached out to other candidates to see what their appetite is for participating in our process, and it was not a no,
Right.
you know, and so that then now leaves us at a point where we need to decide what types of contract stuff we're willing to engage in, and what direction we want to go in terms of engaging other candidates.
So we did have other finalists, we are pursuing that group, and pretty much the rest of what we have to say is probably the sort of negotiation topics that we can't really discuss right now.
Right.
Although before we get into that, and while people are here, if anybody does want to ask us a question, we can answer. Happy to entertain it or make a comment. Otherwise, I think our intention would be to move into an executive session to talk about, do you have the language somewhere, Anthony, that we can get into for, yep, Diane?
I understand what you're saying as far as going back to the other candidates, but as an employee, I think that we would like you to really consider us as well, as, you know, with all the changes that are going to be happening within the next year, not just with the town administrator, not just with the director of finance, but there's a lot of other changes that are going to be happening down the road. And for us to have a little bit of stable positions in the town, in our office, I think I would like you to really consider us as well when you are talking about the candidates, because changes are going to happen, and we really need to have somebody in there that is going to care about us, because if we don't have somebody in there that cares about us, I think you're going to see a lot more people jumping ship. I think you're going to see a lot more people leaving the town, which is a really sad state of affairs. I'm really concerned about the people that are working in the town office. There's a lot of people that are concerned about what's gonna happen, what's going on, the day-to-day operations, the morale. And I don't think that bringing another new person into the town right now is really gonna help us. And I'm only one person, and but I hear it a lot. I hear it from a lot of employees, and I just would like you to stop and think about when you are sitting and making this decision, because it's a huge decision. I know it's a decision for the town, and when you're making the decision for the town, we're part of that. And I'd hate to see the town fall apart.
Yeah.
I really would.
Well, I'm sure I speak for everybody that that's absolutely our goal as well. And I just want to point to two things, that the process that we just went through that Chase chaired, I think more so than any hiring process that I can recall in the town, involved systematically engaging with the town hall employees to get everybody's input to the extent possible. I'd also say individually that, just beyond yourself, Diane, I probably have had personal conversations with a couple dozen town employees, so I'm sure most members would have similar experiences, that we get an input from as many people as we can. And everybody wants the same end goal, but they don't all have the same way to get there. So our challenge is to get the person who's the right fit, and fortunately, our process, I think, provided us with some good options, and that's the point we're at right now. Yes, Anita.
Anita Hardy, 19 Russell Street. I was a member of the task committee, and I would just like to put it out there to everybody and anybody that we started on August 29th, and we finished in January. And we had many, many meetings in public session. We had many meetings in executive session. We welcomed input from the public. As you said, we welcomed input from all employees. I'm a 35-year retired employee of this town. And I can tell you that my first and foremost, through the whole thing, once we got to the point where we had experienced people, what was the best fit for Littleton? I'm all about making sure these employees get something that they've been lacking for several years, and that's good communication and feeling like they are cared for and cared about. And I would just like to say that our committee worked diligently through the process. We held to a very high standard of integrity, and I think what we did was a really good job, and we do have good candidates. And I would just say, look at everything and make an educated decision, and know that we did all that we could do to bring you people that were qualified and would fit for the town.
Thank you. Okay. All right, briefly, both of you, and then it's getting late, Mark.
Just a quick comment. When you guys started this process back in August, it was pointed out that the bylaws were kind of arcane and very prescribed on how this process had to go forward, and there was talk at the time of revising them going forward, and I don't know where that.
We've talked recently about that, doing that too, so we it may never apply to us individuals in the future, but some future board, I think we want to arm those folks, whoever they may be, to have enough flexibility to do the job right, as that time at whatever it may be dictates. So we haven't anything formally on that yet, but we're mindful of the the warrant period, and I think we want to act on that.
And I would say that we're still subject to and working under those.
I realize all of that, but while it's easy to forget until the next
Time to do it is now, right, before we forget about it, exactly. Yeah. Gino, last word on the subject?
Well, I'm very shy, so I only say a few words. I concur with Diana. There is a lot of talent in this town. So I think before you go outside, you should concentrate in inside. And then if nobody is willing or able, then you go on the outside. And you know, on the outside, they're already making a lot of money. When they come here, they think they're gonna make more money. So there is a question of also the economic. So try to concentrate on the talent that you have in your town, which is a lot of talent.
Okay, thank you. We thank you all. It's been a great meeting. I think what we're anticipating is with that motion that we would probably be going, we wouldn't be coming out in open session. We wouldn't have any real reason to.
No, I don't think, unless you, yeah.
I would say the anticipation we go into executive session would be to, what's the alternative? To open
And not
session.
return to
Put
open
May,
session there.
and then it's at your discretion, May.
Oh,
So if
okay,
you don't
all
come
right,
back out-
all right. The anticipation is we're not gonna be in
Don't
open session.
put May because it leaves the TV hanging.
Right, yeah. We're not
I
gonna.
don't think we're gonna come back.
No,
We have no
no.
reason to.
So I move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21, to go into executive session to discuss strategy with respect to contract negotiations with non-union personnel and do not intend to return to open session thereafter.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made by Selectman Gerbig, seconded by Selectman Knox. Any further discussion? All those in favor, Selectman Napoli?
Aye.
Selectman Gerbig?
Aye.
Selectman Knox?
Aye.
And Selectman Glavy? Aye as well. Thank you all, folks.